Chapter 394. A burning blood flame boom. 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 Endless blood flames continued to burn in the mother nest's magma. In the blink of an eye, countless evil creature larvae were burned to ashes by the blood flames. Hiss. After all the evil creature larvae died, the magma in the mother nest solidified and stopped working. All the blood flames in the empty space gathered around the figure in the center of the empty space. In an instant, not a single trace of blood flames remained in the empty space. Instead, the slender figure of a youth stood quietly in the center of the empty space. At this moment, Zhuowen's upper body was bare. His entire body was smooth and muscular, and there were no signs of being burned at all. What was even stranger was that in the center of Zhuowen's chest, a blood-red flower with 5 petals was slowly blooming. It was a strange yet poignant sight. Whoosh! Xiao He instantly arrived in front of Zhuowen. It stared at the youth in front of it with a complicated gaze. Zhuowen's willpower had already exceeded its expectations. It had originally thought that Zhuowen would not be able to withstand the flower of flames, but now Zhuowen had done it. Kid. Congratulations on breaking through to the 7th level of the Jade Stone Body Tempering Technique. It looks like you've gained quite a lot this time. At this moment, Zhuowen's face was filled with excitement. After breaking through to the Jade Stone Body Tempering Technique, Zhuowen was shocked to find that his body was filled with an endless amount of strength. Moreover, this strength was far greater than before he broke through. Now, even a slight wave of his arm could easily cause his strength to reach 7 or 800,000 jin. If he used his full strength, it would probably exceed 500,000 jin. Millimeter. The Jade Stone Body Tempering Technique is truly miraculous. After breaking through to the 7th level, the strength in my body has increased by several times. Right now, just the strength of my body alone has already reached the legendary level of the Sandstone Islands warriors. That's comparable to a peak Ultimate Emperor realm powerhouse. Clenching his right hand, Zhuowen fiercely punched the empty space beneath his feet. With a thunderous explosion, dense cracks began to appear on the surface of the empty space with Zhuowen at the center. When the cracks spread to the edges of the empty space, the entire space actually turned into countless fragments. Zhuowen and Xiao He directly leaped onto the chain stairs. Looking down at the shattered space below, Zhuowen and Xiao He revealed expressions of shock. The power of Zhuowen's punch had greatly exceeded their expectations. What an unexpected strength. Kid, with just the strength of your body now, I'm afraid you don't even need to fear the Lord of the Underworld, Xiao He said emotionally. Nodding slightly, the corners of Zhuowen's mouth also revealed a trace of a happy smile. Indeed, high risk came with high reward. Thinking back to the burning pain he had experienced in the Flower of Flames, Zhuowen still felt some lingering fear. It was just like a fiery hell, and the constantly rising temperature was enough to destroy anyone's rationality. Fortunately, Zhuowen had persevered in the end. Otherwise, it was very likely that he would have been burned to ashes by the Flower of Flames and perished here. Kid. Just now, after you successfully broke through, you actually released a type of blood flame. What exactly is that blood flame? And from the performance just now, that blood flame's strength actually far surpasses that of ordinary earth flames. Even the strength of the other 3 earth flames in your body can't compare to the blood flame you released just now. Xiao He's eyes turned as he suddenly asked Zhuowen. Kai. Hearing this, Zhuowen clenched his fist, and a blood flame that was as viscous as blood suddenly appeared in Zhuowen's palm, burning fiercely. Xiao He could even smell the faint smell of blood in the blood flame. Originally, the Jade Stone Body Tempering Technique mentioned that when breaking through to the 7th level, a flower of flames will form around the body. The flower of flames will have 5 petals, and its breath will be as hot as fire. When the flower of flames completely blooms with 5 petals, it means that the 7th level of the Jade Stone Body Tempering Technique has been completed. The physical body will reach an unimaginable level, and the flower of flames will gradually dissipate. But when I finally endured the painful tempering of the flower of flames didn't dissipate. Instead, it fused with my body, as if it had become one with my body. As long as I want to, I can release an endless amount of blood flame with a punch. What's strange is that the fuel for the blood flame is the blood of living creatures. Therefore, to use the blood flame, I have to consume my own blood. Fortunately, the amount of blood consumed is not much. A trace of doubt appeared in Zhuowen's eyes. He didn't know much about the blood flame, so he could only ask Xiao He for advice. Xiao He looked at Zhuowen strangely and frowned. Logically speaking, the flower of flames should naturally dissipate after it blooms with 5 petals. However, your flower of flames has fused with your body. I'm afraid that this has something to do with your blood fusing with the flower of flames. Xiao He thought back to when the flower of flames had bloomed with 5 petals. Almost all of Zhuowen's blood had been evaporated by the flower of flames, and the evaporated blood had entered the flower of flames, completely fusing with it. As a result, the flower of flames had turned blood red. It was very likely that an unknown mutation had occurred when Zhuowen's blood came in contact with the flower of flames. As a result, the flower of flames had directly established a connection with Zhuowen's body after it had fully bloomed. Not only did it not dissipate, but it had completely fused with Zhuowen's body. Zhuowen nodded in agreement when he heard that. He had also discovered that his body was probably even more powerful than the 7th layer of the Jadestone body tempering method after fusing with the blood flames. Moreover, Zhuowen could control the blood flames to launch surprise attacks as he wished as well. Looks like you've really profited from a disaster. The blood flames are far more powerful than regular earth flames. They're comparable to the most powerful earth flames. Even an ordinary Ultimate Emperor Realm cultivator would find it difficult to withstand them. Moreover, your blood flames can combine with the other 3 earth flames in the 9-wheel incineration cauldron to form the 9-wheel incineration formation. Xiao He could not help but click his tongue in wonder at Zhuowen's fortuitous encounter. He sighed inwardly at how lucky Zhuowen was. Originally, the 9-wheel heaven incineration cauldron was already powerful enough to threaten an early-stage Ultimate Emperor Realm cultivator with the 3 earthly fires. However, if the blood flames were added into the cauldron, the 9-wheel heaven incineration formation's power would rise to a whole new level. It would already be able to kill a peak first-wheel Ultimate Emperor Realm cultivator, and it might even be able to trap an early-stage second-wheel Ultimate Emperor Realm cultivator for some time. Zhuowen could not help but grin. The blood flames he obtained from his breakthrough were truly timely. They had instantly increased his trump cards and strength by quite a bit. Since the Jadestone body tempering method has successfully broken through to the 7th layer, we should go up and take a look. I wonder if the Nether King is at the other end of the stairs. At this moment, Zhuowen was filled with confidence. With his current strength, he was comparable to a peak Ultimate Emperor Realm cultivator. Moreover, once he broke through to the Ultimate Emperor Realm, his battle prowess would rise to another level. He would probably not be weaker than an ordinary second Ultimate Emperor Realm cultivator. Whoosh! With that, Zhuowen stepped onto the stairs and turned into a blur as he shot towards the top of the stairs. Above the chain stairs was an extremely vast grassland. Strangely, this grassland was actually a strange ink-black color. The entire grassland looked extremely gloomy and terrifying. At the end of the grassland was a huge black castle that resembled a coiling dragon. It stood silently at the end of the grassland, and this was the Nether King's Nether Castle. They were on top of a high slope that was filled with dense black weeds. Waves of strange black aura lingered in the surroundings. It was silent and strange. On the other side of the slope was a pitch-black abyss. The stairs formed by 3 chains had appeared out of nowhere at the entrance to the abyss, as if someone had opened up a path to the grassland from the depths of the abyss. Whoosh! Whoosh! Numerous rushing air sounds suddenly appeared on the middle flight of stairs. Immediately, 5 somewhat miserable-looking figures suddenly rushed out from the middle flight of stairs and arrived on the tall slope in an instant. The leader of the 5 figures was a handsome brown-haired youth. This brown-haired youth was the captain of 9 Dragons City, Fenglong originally. There were 8 people from 9 Dragons City who had entered the training grounds, but now there were only 5 left. Obviously, the remaining 3 had perished in the Broodmother's lava. I really didn't expect the Mother Nest's lava to be so dangerous and difficult to deal with. If we hadn't used a treasure bestowed by the City Lord, I'm afraid we would have been buried in the Mother Nest. Fenglong gloomily stared at the stairs behind him as he spoke with some fear. Sigh. In the end, We still lost 3 people. What Saintess Alice said was right. The entire training ground is already under the control of the Netherworld King. I wonder if we can successfully seize the power of the Holy City. The red-clothed woman said with a worried look in her beautiful eyes. As soon as the woman in red finished speaking, the others in the group instantly fell silent. After experiencing the miserable battle from before, they'd already started to fear the Nether King. Whoosh! Whoosh! Right at this moment, 3 figures flashed out from the leftmost chain staircase. They were the only 3 remaining half-step Ultimate Emperor Realm cultivators in Thunder Universe City. Based on the exhaustion on their faces, Thunder Universe City was probably not in a better state than Nine Dragon City. It might even be worse. Damned Nether King, if I catch you, I will make you beg for death. The moment the white-haired Pang Tong appeared on the high slope, he roared furiously at the sky. Feng Long shook his head when he saw the unwilling expression on Pang Tong's face. He said, "Brother Pang, the Nether King's true body is in the Black Castle ahead. He's too strong. I'm afraid we'll have to join forces to defeat him and successfully obtain the power of the Holy City." Pang Tong regained his composure at this moment. He glanced at Feng Long and thought for a moment before he gritted his teeth and said, "All right, I won't let the Nether King go. But what about the power of the Holy City after we deal with him? Of course we'll fight for it with our own ability. The power of the Holy City will naturally belong to whoever obtains it." Feng Long smiled faintly. The corners of Pang Tong's mouth twitched when he looked at the 5 people on Feng Long's side and the 3 people on his side. However, he knew that they wouldn't be able to deal with the Nether King if they didn't join forces. "All right. Let's join forces for now." After agreeing to Feng Long's suggestion, Pang Tong quickly noticed the chain stairs on the rightmost side. A strange expression immediately appeared in his eyes. He said, "Why is there another chain stairs? Has someone else entered the training ground?" Chapter 395. Black Grassland. The rightmost chain staircase appeared serene and tranquil at this moment. Waves of ink-black chi slowly swirled up from the bottom of the abyss, adding a trace of mystery to the staircase. "That's impossible. On the entire Sandstone Island, aside from your Nine Dragons City and our Thunder Universe City, there shouldn't be a third team that has the strength to pass through the Mother Nest's lava." The hot-tempered Pang Tong frowned slightly and said in a low, muffled voice, "Since a third flight of stairs has appeared, it means that there is indeed a third team that has successfully broken through the Mother Nest's magma like us. Otherwise, this flight of stairs wouldn't have appeared in front of us for no reason." Feng Long was also rather puzzled as he spoke. Could it be the 3 people from the low-grade city we met in the Sacred Hall? After all, there are exactly 3 teams in the entire Holy City, including that team from the low-grade city. The red-clothed woman in the Nine Dragons City team suddenly said. However, when the red-clothed woman said this, everyone on the high slope shook their heads. After all, Zhuowen's team was only 3 people, and they were from a low-grade city. One had to know that each team from the 2 high-grade cities had sent 8 people into the Mother Nest's lava. Moreover, all 8 of them were elites with strength at least at the Heavenly King realm. There were even 3 half-step Ultimate Emperor realm experts. If such a lineup had suffered heavy losses in the Mother Nest's lava, there was no need to mention Zhuowen's team of 3 from a low-grade city. As far as they were concerned, Zhuowen's group definitely wasn't that strong. Moreover, there were only 3 members of their group. Even if all 3 of them were half-step Ultimate Emperor realm cultivators, it would still be extremely difficult for them to survive the Mother Nest's lava. You think too highly of those 3 fellows who came from a low-level city. With just the 3 of them, even our Thunder Universe City won't be able to stop the endless number of evil creature larvae in the Mother Nest's lava unless they have an Ultimate Emperor realm expert. Heh. Even our Thunder Universe City team doesn't have an Ultimate Emperor realm expert. How could those 3 guys possibly have such an expert? Pang Tong grinned, his face full of mockery. Although the red-clothed woman was somewhat displeased with Pang Tong's attitude, she knew that her guess was somewhat unrealistic. She glared at Pang Tong and fell silent. "All right. You don't have to argue anymore. Perhaps this flight of stairs originally existed. Right now, our priority is to rush to the Netherworld Castle." The Netherworld King is not so easy to deal with. We have to work together and go all out, Feng Long suddenly berated. After Feng Long's shout, the few people present became quiet. Even Pang Long from the Thunder Universe City could only glare at Feng Long angrily. He let out a cold snort and also became quiet. Feng Long was the strongest amongst them. Although he was also a half-step Ultimate Emperor Realm cultivator, he was far stronger than ordinary half-step Ultimate Emperor Realm cultivators because he could break through to the Ultimate Emperor Realm at any time. Although Pang Long was arrogant and unruly, he didn't want to offend Feng Long too much. Thud, thud, thud. The crisp sound of footsteps suddenly broke the silence on the high slope. The footsteps were slow and distant, coming from the rightmost chain stairs. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. In an instant, everyone on the high slope looked at each other in dismay. Their gazes converged on the rightmost chain stairs. They originally thought that the chain stairs were abandoned and there wouldn't be anyone inside. However, the crisp sound of footsteps completely shattered their suspicions. There's actually someone inside. Could it be Azure Dragon City or Jiayu City? Pang Tong's pupils shrank as he couldn't help but mutter to himself. There were a total of 4 high-grade cities on the Sandstone Island. Aside from Thunder Universe City and Nine Dragon City, only Azure Dragon City and Jiayu City were left. Apart from these 2 high-grade cities, Pang Tong really couldn't think of any other cities on the Sandstone Island that had the strength to pass through the Mother Nest's lava. Although Azure Dragon City and Jiayu City are also high-grade cities, they don't even have a single half-step Ultimate Emperor Realm cultivator in their teams. Their strength is ranked at the bottom of all the high-grade cities. Do you think these 2 useless teams have the strength to pass through the Mother Nest's lava? The red-clothed woman sneered. Pang Tong's eyes narrowed when he heard this. A trace of anger appeared on his face as he retorted, If it's not Azure Dragon City or Jiayu City, then do you think it's a team from a mid-grade or low-grade city that came out of the chain stairs? Enough. There's no need to quarrel. The footsteps are getting closer and closer. I'm sure you'll soon see the owner of the footsteps. There's no point in arguing about this now. Feng Long held his forehead and chided again. After Feng Long finished speaking, a slender figure slowly appeared in everyone's line of sight on the rightmost chain stairs. With the help of the faint light from the high slope, everyone could finally see the true face of this figure. It was a black-haired youth who was about 18 years old. When he reached the exit of the stairs, the youth looked around as if nothing had happened. Soon after, he saw Feng Long and the others on the high slope not far away. Their gazes were focused on him. He smiled slightly and directly walked towards the high slope. This guy. Isn't he one of the 3 people we met in the Sacred Hall? When he saw Zhuowen's true face, Pang Tong's pupils constricted and his mouth opened slightly. His eyes were filled with disbelief. Could it be that this guy from a low-grade city had actually made it through the terrifying lava of the Mother Nest? However, Pang Tong quickly sensed that Zhuowen's aura was extremely weak. It was probably around the level of an ordinary Heavenly King stage cultivator. How could someone with such strength make it through the Mother Nest's lava? With Zhuowen's cultivation as a peak 3rd grade Arcana Master, it was extremely easy for him to use his mental energy to conceal his aura. Even Pang Tong and Feng Long, who were half-step Ultimate Emperor Realm experts, couldn't detect him in the slightest. He's clearly only at the initial Heavenly King stage. How did this guy do it? Pang Tong was even more puzzled. At the same time, the others on the slope were also looking at the slowly approaching youth with astonishment. Their thoughts were the same as Pang Tong's. How did this kid, whose aura was only at the Heavenly King stage, make it through the Mother Nest's lava? Very quickly, Zhuowen arrived at the top of the slope. He nodded at Feng Long and the others and didn't say anything else. He walked past them and entered the strange black grassland, heading straight for the Nether Castle. He could sense that the Nether King's true body was in the castle at the end of the grassland. When Zhuowen and Pang Tong brushed past each other, Pang Tong's gaze immediately stared straight at Zhuowen beside him as he coldly said, "Brat, how did you make it through the Mother Nest's lava? Could it be that there's a shortcut in the Mother Nest's lava?" Hearing this, Zhuowen's footsteps paused. He tilted his head slightly to look at Pang Tong, who had an unfriendly expression on his face, and said, "What does that have to do with you?" After saying that, Zhuowen ignored Pang Tong and walked past him, slowly walking towards the black grassland. When Zhuowen said that, Pang Tong's face stiffened. He didn't expect the youth in front of him to be so arrogant and not give him any face at all. This made Pang Tong, who was already in a bad mood, even angrier. His eyes completely darkened. The crowd on the slope also quieted down at this moment. They looked at the youth not far away as if they were looking at an idiot. Pang Tong was the captain of Thunder University, and his strength was considered extremely strong among the half-step Ultimate Emperor stage cultivators. He was only slightly weaker than Feng Long, and his strength was second only to Feng Long. Perhaps even Feng Long wouldn't dare to speak so presumptuously to Pang Tong. However, this youth, whose aura was only at the Heavenly King stage, not only did he say that, but he also spoke so confidently, as if Pang Tong was just a clown in front of him. Of course, in Zhuowen's opinion, Pang Tong was no different from a clown. One had to know that before entering the trial grounds, Zhuowen's cultivation was actually about the same as Feng Long's. He had reached the point where he could break through to the Ultimate Emperor stage at any time. Coupled with his powerful physical body that was comparable to the Netherworld race, Zhuowen's strength was completely above Feng Long's. Zhuowen had just broken through to the 7th layer of the Jadestone Body Tempering Manual. Coupled with the extremely powerful blood flames, Zhuowen's strength had already far surpassed Feng Long's. He was completely comparable to a peak Ultimate Emperor stage cultivator. As the saying went, the higher one stood, the further one could see. With Zhuowen's current strength, even Feng Long was probably not worthy of his attention, let alone Pang Tong, who was even weaker. What an arrogant brat. You're just a lowly commoner from a low-level city. How dare you be so arrogant in front of me? Let's see if I don't break your legs today. Pang Tong's eyes turned incomparably red as he roared. In his opinion, a lowly commoner from a low-level city like Zhuowen only had the right to look up to him. Since when did a lowly commoner like him have the right to criticize him? Moreover, he was being so impolite. The sullen feeling almost made Pang Tong lose all reason. Boom! Pang Tong's foot suddenly stomped on the ground, and origin energy instantly surged out from his body like a tidal wave. His fingers clenched into a fist, and he directly smashed it towards the nearby Zhuowen. He wanted this kid who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth to die immediately. Pang Tong is using his full strength. Is this fellow planning to kill that youth directly? The woman in red's pretty face twitched as she spoke with some displeasure. Although she did not like Pang Tong, the woman in red did not have the slightest intention of stopping him. After all, it was not worth it to offend Pang Tong for a lowly commoner from a low-level city. Feng Long, on the other hand, appeared extremely calm from the beginning to the end. Whether it was Zhuowen who appeared from the chain stairs or Pang Tong who was in a rage, Feng Long did not reveal the slightest trace of surprise. In his opinion, the most important thing was to obtain the strength of the sacred city in the training ground. Boom! In the blink of an eye, Pang Tong's huge fist, which was covered with a golden glow, heavily smashed onto Zhuowen's back. Perhaps he was scared silly, but Zhuowen did not dodge at all. He continued to walk forward leisurely as if he was not aware of Pang Tong's attack. An ear-piercing sound, as if the sky was falling and the earth was splitting, suddenly rose from the high slope. Immediately, the black weeds in the surrounding dozens of feet were uprooted by the powerful airwave and drifted with the wind. Brat, if you die, don't blame me. If you want to blame someone, blame yourself for being so arrogant even though you clearly have no strength. This in itself has determined your fate. Chapter 396. The Alliance. Everyone on the slope shook their heads when they saw Pang Tong's ferocious attack. They knew that Zhuowen was doomed. After all, Pang Tong was stronger than most half-step Ultimate Emperor realm cultivators. Apart from Feng Long, everyone else would be injured by Pang Tong's attack, let alone Zhuowen who had the weakest aura. Clang! The crisp sound of metal colliding rang out. It was as if Pang Tong's fist had struck an extremely hard rock. Pang Tong's expression completely stiffened at this moment. This was because he realized that Zhuowen, who appeared to be too weak to even stand up to a gust of wind, was completely unharmed by his attack. Zhuo Wen's footsteps paused as he tilted his head slightly. His gaze was cold as he stared at Pang Tong behind him. An aura that was not weaker than Pang Tong's suddenly surged out from Zhuo Wen's body. That extremely powerful aura formed an extremely powerful chi wave around the two of them. This aura, is actually a half-step ultimate Emperor realm cultivator? Didn't this guy come from a low-grade city? Pang Tong's pupils shrank to the size of needles. He stared at Zhuowen in disbelief. The strength of the youth in front of him had exceeded his expectations. Not only was his physical body strong, but his cultivation level was also on par with his own. Pang Tong couldn't help but feel incredulous. Zhuowen didn't say anything. He clenched his fist and lightly punched out. There was nothing fancy about this punch. There wasn't even a trace of yuan power. It looked just like an ordinary person's attack. Seeing Zhuo Wen's light punch, the astonishment on Pang Tong's face instantly turned into anger. He roared in a low voice, "You bastard, don't look down on others just because you have a strong physical body. You actually didn't even use yuan power." As he spoke, Pang Tong punched out again. The powerful golden origin energy made his fist seem extremely huge and powerful. The air was even torn into countless cyclone fragments by the powerful force. Rumble. Amidst the countless cyclones, the two fists fiercely collided. In an instant, countless small storms wreaked havoc between the two of them. The ground within a radius of several feet completely cracked open. Fine sand floated upwards as if it was defying gravity. The two of them were immediately covered by a thick layer of sand. Catcher. However, a clear bone-cracking sound suddenly broke the stalemate situation. Immediately, a miserable cry suddenly sounded. After which, a strong figure flew out from the thick layer of sand. Fresh blood formed a parabola as it wildly shot out from the flying figure. It was sad, beautiful, and tragic. Swish. Swish. The eyes of Feng Long's group on the tall slope immediately gathered on this figure. Their eyes shrunk when they saw the face of this figure. This was because the figure that flew backwards was none other than the captain of the Thunder Universe City, Pang Tong. Captain. Captain. The two remaining half-step Ultimate Emperor Realm men from Thunder Universe City cried out in surprise. They stomped their feet and transformed into a blur to catch Pang Tong, who was flying backwards. With the help of the two of them, Pang Tong's feet staggered. Only then did he stop a dozen meters away in a somewhat miserable manner. His left hand covered his right hand as he looked in front of him with a frightened expression. His right hand had been fractured in the collision earlier. The originally calm Feng Long's eyes shrunk slightly when he saw that Pang Tong had been injured in a single exchange. Finally, he revealed a slightly moved expression. He did not expect that Zhuowen, who clearly came from a low-rank city, would possess such great strength. Even Pang Tong had been injured in a single exchange. This brat is a little extraordinary. The corners of Feng Long's mouth twitched as he frowned and softly muttered. Swoosh. A sharp sound of rushing air suddenly surged over. Immediately, Pang Tong was shocked to discover that Zhuowen's eyes were currently filled with a sinister coldness. His murderous aura surged as he rushed towards Pang Tong. His eyes did not hide the rich murderous intent in them. Pang Tong finally felt fear. He could sense that the pressure that the young man in front of him gave him was not weaker than Feng Long's. Clearly, this unknown young man was like Feng Long, a monster who could break through to the ultimate Emperor realm at any time. You dare to kill me? I am the son of the Thunder Universe City's City Lord. If you kill me, my father and our Thunder Universe City will definitely not let you off. Pang Tong was both shocked and furious at Zhuowen. He hurriedly said hatefully, I hate it when people threaten me the most. You can die now. Zhuowen's indifferent voice followed. Following which, Zhuowen's speed did not decrease. Instead, it increased to the extreme. He turned into numerous afterimages in the air as he rushed towards Pang Tong at an even faster speed. This action immediately caused Pang Tong to complain incessantly in his heart. Just as Zhuowen was about to reach Pang Tong, a slender figure suddenly blocked in front of Pang Tong. Immediately, Zhuowen felt an extremely sharp force rushing towards his face. Humph! With a cold snort, Zhuowen was not afraid. He directly threw a punch out and ruthlessly smashed against the sharp force. Thud, 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 thud. Zhuowen and the figure involuntarily took a dozen steps back. When Zhuowen finally came to a stop, his eyes narrowed as he looked ahead. He just so happened to see Feng Long smiling not too far away. "Oh, you want to stop me from killing this fellow?" Zhuowen narrowed his eyes. He could not help but look at the smiling Feng Long. After exchanging blows with Feng Long, he discovered that Feng Long's strength had somewhat exceeded his expectations. He was actually an expert who could break through to the ultimate emperor realm at any time. If it was in the past, perhaps Zhuowen would be more afraid of an opponent like Feng Long. However, after breaking through to the 7th level of the Jade Stone body tempering technique, Zhuowen's strength had far surpassed Feng Long's. The only reason he had been evenly matched with Feng Long earlier was because Zhuowen had not revealed his full strength. If Zhuowen had used the full strength of the 7th level of the Jade Stone body tempering technique and that strange and unpredictable blood flame, Zhuowen's strength would have reached an extremely terrifying level. Even the current Feng Long was probably far from being a match for Zhuowen. Haha. Little brother, I believe that your goal in entering the training grounds is the same as ours. You're all here for the power of the holy city, right? You've also seen the current situation of the trial grounds. Almost everything here has been eroded by the Lord of the Underworld. I'm afraid that the key to the power of the holy city has been controlled by the Lord of the Underworld. Furthermore, the Lord of the Underworld's strength is probably comparable to a legendary warrior. In other words, he's in existence at the peak of the ultimate emperor realm. At this moment, Feng Long's tone had become extremely polite. After exchanging blows with the young man, he had been shocked to discover that this young man who was younger than him was actually not weaker than him. Clearly, this young man was also an expert who could break through to the ultimate emperor realm at any time. Is this young man really from a low-level city? He's younger than me, but his strength is already on par with mine. He can even break through to the ultimate emperor realm at any time. How could a low-level city have nurtured such a monstrous genius? Zhuowen knew that Feng Long probably did not intend to make an enemy out of him. His eyes narrowed. Are you saying that you intend to form an alliance with me? Little brother, you really are smart. If I'm not wrong, little brother, you're an expert who can break through to the ultimate emperor realm at any time. But even then, our strength is only comparable to an early-stage ultimate emperor realm expert at most. It's probably quite difficult for you to deal with the Nether King by yourself. Right now, we can only defeat the Hell King if we work together, Feng Long said with a smile. The remaining 4 members of Nine Dragons City were quite surprised by Feng Long's courteous attitude, but they weren't too surprised because Zhuowen's strength was comparable to their captain Feng Long's. After all, the strong would be respected wherever they went. Pang Tong's eyes darkened when he saw Feng Long treat Zhuowen so courteously. However, he did not dare say anything because he knew that the young man before him was strong enough to kill him instantly. Between his emotions and his life, Pang Tong naturally chose his life. He no longer dared to say anything in front of Zhuowen. After a moment of silence, Zhuowen nodded. All right. The Hell King is indeed powerful. He's not someone I can deal with alone. After thinking about it, Zhuowen agreed to Feng Long's invitation in the end. Although Zhuowen did not fear the Nether King at all with his current strength, it was only because Zhuowen's body was extremely tough. He did not fear the Nether King's attacks at all. However, Zhuowen might not be able to kill the Nether King with his current strength. Feng Long came from Nine Dragons City, and Nine Dragons City was one of the top high-ranking cities. With Feng Long's strength, he would definitely be highly valued in Nine Dragons City. A monster like him would definitely be bestowed with an extremely powerful life-saving treasure by the higher-ups of Nine Dragons City. Pang Tong should also have a powerful life-saving treasure on him. With such a life-saving treasure, it would not be easy for Zhuowen to kill Pang Tong. Only Zhuowen who revealed his full strength might be able to kill Pang Tong in a short period of time. Little brother is indeed a sensible person. I am Feng Long from Nine Dragons City. I hope to have a pleasant cooperation with you. Seeing that Zhuowen had agreed, Feng Long's face was full of joy. I am Zhuowen from Vine Armor City. However, I have to make one thing clear in advance. After the Hell King is dealt with, the ownership of the Holy City will depend on each person's ability, Zhuowen said indifferently, nodding slightly. Of course, Feng Long said with a faint smile. So you are Zhuowen. My name is Zhu Li. However, are you really from a low-ranking city? Your strength is actually on par with Big Brother Feng Long. You are really monstrous. You should know that Big Brother Feng Long is the idol of the younger generation in Nine Dragons City. The red-clothed woman behind Feng Long suddenly came in front of Zhuowen. Her large, watery eyes stared curiously at Zhuowen. The youth in front of her had really exceeded her expectations. Not only had he passed the test of the Mother Nest's magma, but he had also defeated the powerful Pang Tong in one move. Even Feng Long was unable to gain the slightest advantage against him. She really could not imagine which low-ranking city in Muqin County could cultivate such a monstrous genius. It should be known that even the extremely powerful Nine Dragons City had only cultivated Feng Long. Chapter 397. Yuanli Ball. After reaching an agreement, Feng Long and the others' attitude towards Zhuowen eased a little. They introduced themselves to each other and the atmosphere was harmonious. As for the three people from Thunder Universe City led by Pang Tong, their faces were gloomy. They stood aside and ignored Zhuowen. After what happened just now, Pang Tong and the other two people were not so generous as to shake hands with Zhuowen. Zhuowen did not care about the indifference of Pang Tong and the other two people. After all, he was only in an alliance with them temporarily. Once the Lord of the Underworld was dealt with, they would definitely fight for the power of the Holy City. Haha. With the addition of Brother Zhuo, I'm afraid we will have more confidence in dealing with the Lord of the Underworld when we enter the Netherworld Castle. Feng Long looked at Zhuowen and said with a smile. Feng Long. Stop talking nonsense. Let's go to the Netherworld Castle now. You should know that the Lord of the Underworld is not so easy to deal with. You might lose your life if you are not careful. Especially some arrogant brats. When they are dealing with the Lord of the Underworld, it is easy for them to lose their lives, Pang Tong interrupted coldly. Right now, Pang Tong was in an extremely bad mood. Earlier, he had been defeated by Zhuo when in a single move, causing him, the captain of Thunder University, to lose face. Naturally, his attitude towards Zhuo was not very good. Feng Long frowned when he heard this. However, he still asked Zhuowen with a smile, Brother Zhuo, what do you think? Let's go. I also want to see how powerful the Lord of the Underworld is. Zhuowen did not care about Pang Tong's hostility and said with a smile. Seeing that Zhuowen had agreed, Feng Long let out a sigh of relief. He shouted at the team and led the team to the Netherworld Castle at the end of the grassland. Zhuowen slowly followed at the back of the team. He looked calm on the surface, but his eyes were vigilantly staring at the Netherworld Castle that stood quietly at the end of the grassland. He could faintly feel that the Netherworld Castle was definitely not ordinary. As the owner of the Netherworld Castle, it was very likely that the Netherworld King had set up extremely troublesome traps inside. It was precisely because of this inexplicable ominous feeling that Zhuowen finally decided to ally with Feng Long. Nine Dragons City and Thunder Universe City were both top-ranked advanced cities. Every member of their teams was an elite expert. If these elites worked together, Zhuowen would have a hard time dealing with them even if he went all out. Hence, following these two teams was undoubtedly a wise choice. Meanwhile, Feng Long had also taken a fancy to Zhuowen's strength. Hence, he had enthusiastically tried to recruit Zhuowen. After all, if he could gain a combatant on par with Feng Long, his chances of clearing Nether Castle would increase significantly. Furthermore, Feng Long was not afraid that the Holy City's strength would fall into Zhuowen's hands. Although Zhuowen's strength had somewhat exceeded his expectations, it was only on par with him. Furthermore, their Nine Dragons City team had as many as 5 people. When the time came to snatch the Holy City's strength, Nine Dragons City would undoubtedly have a great advantage. Just as everyone was walking on the grassland in peace, at the end of the grassland, at the Netherworld Castle that was shrouded in endless ink-black fog, the Netherworld King, who was dressed in a black suit, stood on the city wall. His scarlet eyes looked into the distance as he stared at the black grassland in front of him. The corners of his mouth curled into an elegant arc. This king is truly a little surprise. The 3 activated mother nests have all been broken through. The strength of the toys that entered the training ground this time is different from before, especially that brat from the first mother nest. He actually destroyed the mother nest by himself and arrived at the Netherworld grassland. The Netherworld king licked his ink-black lips. His scarlet eyes became somewhat fanatical as he laughed sinisterly. That young man might become the most exquisite treasure that I have collected in 1,000 years. Hee hee. When Feng Long and the others finally arrived at the entrance of the Netherworld castle, they raised their heads to look at the strange and sinister castle before them. They could feel a bone-chilling coldness that came from within. It was as if they had fallen into an icehouse, causing them to involuntarily shiver. This is the Netherworld castle that the Netherworld king lives in? It really is incomparably cold, the red-clothed woman behind Feng Long, Ju Li, said softly with some unease as she shrunk her neck. The others also looked at the Netherworld castle before them with grave expressions. They had already estimated the Netherworld king's strength before they entered the training ground. They knew that he was an existence that was comparable to an ultimate emperor realm cultivator at the peak of the first wheel. He was definitely a great enemy to them. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes as he stared at the huge castle shrouded in black fog. However, he secretly called out to Xiao He, did you find anything out of the ordinary about the Nether castle? Also, is the Netherworld king really hiding in the Netherworld castle? After a while, Xiao Hei's grave voice rang out in Zhuowen's mind. Kid, this Netherworld castle is a little strange. It can actually block this Dragon Lord's senses. However, I can faintly sense that the Netherworld king's aura is within the castle. As for where exactly he is, I can't find out the exact location. However, you have to be extremely careful once you enter the Netherworld castle. The danger level of the Netherworld castle is probably even higher than the mother nest's lava. Zhuowen's expression changed slightly when he heard this. His eyes immediately darkened. He hadn't expected Xiao He to give the Netherworld castle such a high evaluation. The mother nest's lava was already abnormal enough. This so-called Netherworld castle was actually even more dangerous than the former. It looked like he really had to be careful once he entered the Netherworld castle. Creak. Just as everyone was looking at the Netherworld castle before them with grave gazes, the tall and strange castle gates slowly opened from the middle, revealing a dark corridor within. Cake. Welcome to the Netherworld castle, my cute toys. Following the ear-piercing sound of the door opening, a sharp and sinister laughter slowly spread from the corridor behind the castle gates to everyone's ears. A cold and gloomy aura also rushed out from the castle gates. Humph. Deliberately mystifying fellow. Pang Tong coldly snorted and directly led the remaining 2 members of the Thunder Universe City team into the castle gates. He had no intention of waiting for the others. Although Feng Long was a little displeased with Pang Tong's unauthorized action, he didn't say anything. After all, Pang Tong and the other 2 weren't his subordinates. He didn't have the authority to order them around. Let's go in too. Feng Long shook his head and also led the few members of the 9 Dragons City team into the corridor. Zhuowen naturally followed closely behind Feng Long and the others. The corridor was about 2 meters high and 1 meter wide. It was extremely narrow. Candles hung on both sides of the corridor, emitting a dim yellow light. After entering the corridor, Zhuowen felt a bone-chilling cold continuously invading his body. Fortunately, Zhuowen's physical body was so strong that it was impervious to poison. The cold aura had no effect on him at all. The 5 people from the 9 Dragons City only needed to circulate a little yuan power to completely expel the cold aura. Let's go. Pang Tong and the other 2 shouldn't have gone too far. After all, we are an alliance. Moreover, we are now in this dangerous Netherworld castle. It's best not to split up. Feng Long said a few words to the few people behind him. Then, he directly rushed toward the corridor. Zhuowen and the others naturally didn't have any objections. They all followed closely behind Feng Long. The corridor was extremely deep and seemed to be endless. The group of 6 flew for nearly an hour, but they still hadn't walked out of the corridor. Just when Feng Long and the others were a little impatient, the red-clothed lady called Ju Li suddenly said in surprise, "Look, There is light in front. That should be the exit of the corridor. Hearing this, the rest of the people also looked forward. Sure enough, they found that there was a rather dazzling white light in front of them. Immediately, their spirits were lifted and they rushed toward the exit of the corridor. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. In the blink of an eye, the group of 6 entered the white light. The dazzling light involuntarily caused everyone to raise their hands to cover their eyes. When the light gradually faded, everyone slowly opened their eyes and saw the scenery at the exit of the corridor clearly. This was an extremely spacious hall. The hall was surrounded by huge stone pillars that were as thick as 3 people hugging together. They supported the arched roof at the top. In the middle of the hall, there was a huge light ball that was dozens of feet in size quietly floating. The dazzling white light just now was emitted from this light ball. At this moment, Pang Tong and the other 2 were standing in front of the light ball. Their eyes were looking at the light ball in the middle of the hall. As if they had heard the footsteps of Feng Long and the others, Pang Tong and the other 2 turned their heads to look at Feng Long and the others who had just entered. Their faces were expressionless. Pang Tong, what is that light ball in the middle of the hall? Feng Long came to Pang Tong's side and focused his gaze on the light ball as he asked curiously. However, Pang Tong shook his head and said, I have also just arrived not long ago. I don't know what this light ball is. However, I can feel that this light ball is filled with an extremely rich yuan power. I'm afraid that this thing is extremely beneficial to our cultivation. At this point, a trace of greed appeared in Pang Tong's eyes. His gaze was fixed on the light ball in front of him. After Pang Tong's reminder, Feng Long and the others also noticed the extremely rich yuan power contained in the light ball. A trace of astonishment appeared in their eyes. However, this trace of astonishment was quickly replaced by a burning desire. If my guess is correct, this light ball is very likely the extremely famous yuan power ball from ancient times. It is said that the yuan power ball contains an extremely large amount of yuan power. Moreover, this yuan power can basically be directly absorbed without refining. It can raise a warrior's cultivation level in a short period of time. Moreover, there are no side effects. However, this kind of thing has been lost for a long time in the recent ancient times. I did not expect to see such an ancient treasure in the Netherworld castle. Feng Long seemed to recognize the huge light ball in front of him. He could not help but murmur the origins of the light ball. His gaze became even more fervent. A treasure like the yuan power ball that could raise one's cultivation level extremely quickly was an extremely precious item no matter which era it was in. If such an item was placed in the outside world, it was likely that even an ultimate 9-wheel emperor would try to snatch it. Chapter 398. First floor what? It's actually a yuan energy ball. This is something that could be considered a treasure even in ancient times. It actually appeared in Nether Castle. As expected of the inside of the Essence Tower, there are opportunities everywhere. I can't believe I can encounter such a treasure in this training ground. Everyone in the hall immediately started discussing as they stared fixedly at the ball of light in the center of the hall. Something like a yuan energy ball was extremely tempting to any cultivator. Kid, there's an extremely powerful restriction on the surface of this ball of light. It's best if you don't get too close. When Zhuowen's gaze converged on the ball of light, Xiao Hei's voice slowly rang out in his mind. Immediately, Zhuowen's eyes narrowed into slits because he actually did not detect any trace of restriction on the surface of the ball of light. This yuan energy ball belongs to me, Pang Tong. Haha. Finally, someone could no longer hold back. The first person to make a move was the captain of Thunder Universe City, Pang Tong. Pang Tong's eyes were filled with passion as he stared at the ball of light. His feet suddenly stomped on the ground as his speed soared to the extreme. In an instant, he arrived on the surface of the ball of light. Damn it! Pang Tong, stop right there. Feng Long did not expect Pang Tong to be so fast. At first, he was stunned. Then, a trace of anger appeared on his face as he pushed his speed to the extreme and chased after Pang Tong. Feng Long, although you're stronger than me, I'm afraid that you might not be faster than me in terms of speed. Therefore, this yuan energy ball is destined to be mine. Pang Tong laughed as he increased his speed once again. He practically formed an afterimage in the air as he instantly pulled a small distance away from Feng Long. This caused Feng Long to be somewhat flustered and exasperated. The only person in the hall who could still be considered calm was Zhuowen. At this moment, a trace of schadenfreude appeared on Zhuowen's face. He had never doubted Xiao Hei's judgment. Therefore, Zhuowen, who stood out, was likely to suffer a calamity. Whoosh! In the blink of an eye, Pang Tong was already within reach of the glowing ball. He could directly touch the glowing ball if he extended his hand. The smile on Pang Tong's face became even more brilliant. He knew that if he obtained this Yuan power ball and completely refined the rich Yuan power within it, his strength would soar by leaps and bounds. It would not be much of a problem for him to catch up to Feng Long. Filled with excitement and joy, Pang Tong's right hand reached into the sphere of light. At that moment, the smile on his face froze and his rosy cheeks turned incomparably dark. Bang! The ball of light suddenly trembled, and an extremely vast force immediately rebounded from the ball of light, violently slamming into Pang Tong's body. Poochie! A mouthful of blood immediately spurted out as Pang Tong flew backwards in an extremely miserable manner. He slid on the ground for several dozen meters before finally slamming into one of the stone pillars in the hall. His entire body was embedded within the stone pillar. Hiss! Everyone in the hall sucked in a breath of cold air. They had clearly checked the surface of the glowing ball and there were no restrictions, so why was Pang Tong directly repelled when he came into contact with the glowing ball? At this moment, Feng Long had already arrived before the glowing ball. However, due to Pang Tong's experience, Feng Long had become extremely cautious. His right hand gently touched the surface of the glowing ball. The moment his right hand came into contact with the glowing ball, he could feel an extremely terrifying force constantly obstructing his right hand. How strange. He actually placed a restriction in the glowing ball. No wonder I was unable to detect any traces of a restriction in the beginning. Withdrawing his right hand, Feng Long gently took a few steps back. His gaze was rather strange as he muttered to himself. Looks like Brother Pang's luck isn't too good. With that, Feng Long's gaze turned and immediately focused on Pang Tong, who was struggling to get up from the stone pillar. On the stone pillar, Pang Tong, who had just been helped up by two of his subordinates, could not help but spit out another mouthful of blood when he heard Feng Long's mocking words. He viciously glared at Feng Long before silently walking to the side and sitting down to heal. Kai! At the same time, the light in the glowing ball suddenly trembled, revealing a rather delicate and pretty face of a youth. He had black hair and red eyes. He was dressed in formal attire and had ink-black lips. He appeared gloomy and strange. Welcome to the Netherworld Castle. I wonder if everyone was satisfied with the welcome gift just now? The scarlet-eyed youth placed his right hand on his chest and elegantly lowered his head as he grinned. Hearing the profound words of the scarlet-eyed youth, Pang Tong, who was still silently recuperating, suddenly opened his eyes. His beast-like eyes stared straight at the youth's figure in the ball of light. He knew that the mystery behind the ball of elemental energy was definitely caused by this fellow. You are the Netherworld King? Feng Long looked at the youth in the glowing ball and calmly asked. Hee, that's me. Furthermore, I also know that you risked your lives to enter the training grounds. I'm afraid it's for the Holy City's power, right? However, I can regretfully tell you that you will not be able to obtain the Holy City's power because it has already been obtained by me. The scarlet-eyed youth laughed sinisterly. He waved his right hand and a small golden city appeared in his palm. This small golden city looked like the Holy City. The Holy City's power? Everyone in the hall could not help but exclaim when they saw the miniature golden city in the youth's palm. Back in the sacred hall, Alice had already told everyone what the Holy City's power looked like. Therefore, everyone immediately recognized the miniature golden city when they saw it. Zhuowen suddenly took a step forward. He narrowed his eyes as he stared at the Netherworld King in the glowing ball and said coldly, "As long as I kill you, the Holy City's power will naturally belong to me. Do you think that we can't kill you? Kill me? Brat, aren't you being a little too arrogant? I am immortal here. Regardless of whether it's Alice or you, it's impossible for you to kill me. Moreover, all of you will become my toys." Hee hee. The Netherworld King laughed coldly. The arrogant person should be you. There's nothing in this world that is immortal. As long as one's power reaches a certain level, anything can be destroyed. It's the same for you, Netherworld King, Zhuowen said indifferently. The Netherworld King's eyes immediately turned cold. He glared at Zhuowen and said, "Brat, I've left a deep impression on you. You're quite powerful to be able to destroy the mother nest's magma all by yourself. However, if you think that you can defeat me like that, hey, you're far too naive. In order to reward you for your spectacular performance in the mother nest's magma, I've decided to add you to my collection. You should know that not just anyone can be added to my collection." Everyone in the hall looked at Zhuowen strangely when they heard what the Netherworld King said. They had guessed that Zhuowen had passed through the mother nest's magma. They had always thought that Zhuowen and the other two had entered the trial and that Zhuowen had only survived the mother nest's magma after losing the other two. However, from the Netherworld King's words, it seemed like Zhuowen had entered the trial alone and destroyed the mother nest's magma with his own strength. That was how he had passed through the mother nest's magma. Everyone looked at Zhuowen in shock when they thought of that. After going through the mother nest's magma, they knew very well just how dangerous and difficult it was. Even their team of 8 had to lose a few people before they could pass through the mother nest's magma. It was easy to imagine how difficult it was for someone to pass through the mother nest's magma alone. Even Feng Long could not guarantee that he could pass through the mother nest's magma successfully, but Zhuowen had done it. Feng Long's brows furrowed slightly. He knew that if it were him alone, even he wouldn't be able to withstand the pressure. Thinking of this, Feng Long stared at Zhuowen with a complicated look. He thought to himself, could it be that Zhuowen has been hiding his strength all this time? Zhuowen knew that things were not going well. He did not want to expose his strength completely yet, so he pretended to be calm and said, "I was just lucky. I just happened to have a move that can deal with groups. That's why I showed a certain advantage when I passed through the mother nest's magma." Zhuowen didn't say this for the Underworld King. Instead, he said it to Feng Long and the others. Therefore, Zhuowen raised his voice slightly. When Feng Long and the others heard this, they immediately felt relieved. They secretly praised Zhuowen's luck. He actually had a move that could deal with groups. It should be known that a move that was suitable for group battles was extremely powerful. With such a move, it would be relatively easy to deal with the large number of evil creature larvae in the mother nest's magma. But even so, I still admire Brother Zhuowen's strength. After all, we have personally experienced how powerful the mother nest's magma is. Although you have a move that can deal with groups, it's still very impressive that you can pass through it alone. Feng Long cupped his hands politely at Zhuowen at this time. His sharp eyes were fixed on the latter. He always felt that Zhuowen in front of him gave him an unfathomable feeling. In his heart, he began to secretly regard Zhuowen as his biggest opponent on this trip to the Sandstone Island. "Brother Feng, you're too polite. I'm not as strong as you think. Besides, now is not the time to talk about this. We should be thinking about how to deal with the Netherworld King and seize the Holy City's power." Zhuowen shook his head and said. Hearing this, Feng Long nodded in agreement. After all, the Holy City's power had not been obtained yet. There was no conflict of interest between the two of them. He did not need to go against Zhuowen so early. Thinking of this, Feng Long's gaze shifted slightly. The scarlet-eyed young man gathered in the light ball in the center of the hall said, "Netherworld King, do you dare to fight with us?" As soon as Feng Long said this, the others in the hall also fixed their gazes on the Netherworld King, who was in the light ball, waiting for his answer. "Fight with you? TSK, you think too highly of yourselves. Who do you think I am? Who do you think you are? Do you think a bunch of motley crew like you are qualified to fight with me?" The Netherworld King sneered. "So you're afraid?" Zhuowen suddenly sneered. Chapter 399. Dark Serpent Dragon, I'll be waiting for you on the 3rd floor. With that, the image of the Nether King disappeared from the ball of light, leaving behind a chilling laughter that echoed through the hall. Boom! Boom! At the same time, the entire hall began to shake violently. Immediately, Feng Long and the rest were shocked to discover that the surface of the 4 enormous stone pillars that supported the hall had shattered into numerous cracks. Ow! A deafening roar immediately resounded through the hall. Afterwards, 4 black serpents that were several dozen feet long burst out of the 4 stone pillars. The serpents were covered in pitch-black scales. Their lantern-sized eyes shone with a cold light. When they opened their mouths, they revealed rows of sharp white teeth that shone with a cold light. Be careful. Feng Long and the others' expressions changed drastically. They all retreated and gathered around the ball of light. They stared at the 4 serpents that surrounded them with grave expressions. Zhuowen also retreated silently to the side of the ball of light. A rare trace of seriousness appeared in his eyes. He could sense that the black serpents before him were extremely powerful. They were no weaker than the blood-horned dragon-slaying serpent from the blood-red swamp. The blood-horned dragon-slaying serpent was a soul beast that could rival an early-stage Emperor Realm cultivator. Its destructive power was extremely great, and its defense was terrifyingly tough. Back then, Zhuowen had relied on the Icefire Lotus to barely kill it. Of course, with Zhuowen's current strength, he naturally didn't fear the black serpent that could rival the blood-horned dragon-slaying serpent. If there was only one black serpent, Zhuowen wouldn't be worried. However, now that there were 4 of them, it was rather troublesome. It's actually a dark serpent. That's a soul beast that can rival an early-stage Emperor Realm cultivator. Feng Long's expression changed slightly. When the others heard that, their expressions changed as well. Clearly, they had some understanding of the dark serpent dragon. Faintly, fear appeared on their faces. Feng Long, what should we do now? The arrogant Pang Tong's expression was extremely solemn as he asked Feng Long for advice. Feng Long was the strongest person in the team. In such a critical moment, the others all faintly regarded him as the backbone of the team. Although Zhuowen's strength was not weaker than Feng Long's, Feng Long also came from an advanced city. Naturally, the others were more willing to listen to Feng Long's arrangements. Zhuowen could also sense that the others were distancing themselves from him, but he didn't care. We can only fight now. This should be the first floor of the Nether Castle, and these 4 dark flood dragons should be the guardians of the first floor. Only by defeating these 4 dark flood dragons can we enter the second floor. Therefore, we can only fight now. Feng Long indeed had the demeanor of a leader. At this critical moment, he was extremely calm. Brother Zhuo. Feng Long suddenly turned to Zhuowen and asked. You don't mind if we each deal with 1 dark flood dragon, right? Feng Long knew that he and Zhuowen were the only ones in the team who could break through to the ultimate Emperor realm at any time. Their strength was completely comparable to an early ultimate Emperor realm cultivator. They should have no problem dealing with the dark flood dragons alone. Sure. Zhuowen didn't argue and nodded in agreement. Seeing that Zhuowen had agreed, Feng Long let out a sigh of relief and continued, Zhu Li, you lead the other 3 to hold back one of the black dragon. The last one will be left to Pang Tong and the other 2. The situation was urgent, so Zhu Li and Pang Tong agreed without hesitation. Everyone, don't hold back. Do your best to keep the dark flood dragons busy. As long as we can deal with one of them, we'll definitely win this battle. Feng Long shouted loudly as he stomped his foot on the ground. His entire body turned into a series of after-images as he flew directly towards the black flood dragon closest to the light ball. A powerful aura that wasn't any weaker than an ultimate Emperor realm cultivator surged out of Feng Long's body. At the same time, Feng Long pulled out a golden halberd from his Chenkuan bag. He swung his right hand and smashed it against the black flood dragon's head. Boom! The sound of metal clashing resounded as sparks flew. The halberd only left a white mark on the flood dragon's head. Ow! Feng Long's attack immediately enraged the dark flood dragon. It roared and spat out a thick black poisonous gas from its bloody mouth. It charged towards Feng Long. Feng Long's expression changed slightly. He swung his Fangtian halberd, and the golden essence force formed a hurricane, blocking all the poisonous gas that the black flood dragon shot out. Boom! 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 For a moment, Feng Long and the dark flood dragon were locked in battle. They were evenly matched. However, The dark flood dragon relied on its thick skin and thick flesh to not defend at all. It directly attacked with brute force. This kind of fighting style put Feng Long at a slight disadvantage. Let's go. Seeing Feng Long taking the lead, the woman in red, Zhu Li, naturally would not stand by and watch. She took the 3 members of Nine Dragons City behind her and rushed toward the second dark flood dragon. The 4 of them spread out around the dark flood dragon in the air and used their best moves and spiritual treasures to smash on the dark flood dragon's body. For a moment, they entangled the dark flood dragon. Since Feng Long and the others were trying so hard to pin down the 2 black flood dragons, Zhuo Wen naturally couldn't just stand by and watch. He stomped on the ground and charged towards the other black flood dragon that didn't have an opponent yet. In the process of flying through the air, Zhuo Wen's skin turned into a glazed color. He had performed the 6th level of the jade stone body tempering technique. Boom! As soon as he arrived in front of the dark flood dragon, Zhuo Wen punched out. His powerful physical strength instantly tore through the air and formed small cyclones around his body. Howl! The dark flood dragon roared angrily when it saw the human warrior provoking it so recklessly. A pair of dark claws hidden under its abdomen directly tore through the air and blasted towards Zhuo Wen. Boom! The claws and the fist collided in an instant. At the point of contact, a ring-shaped airwave crazily spread in all directions. The ground even cracked inch by inch under the aftermath of the collision. Thump! 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 Under such a collision, Zhuo Wen and the dark flood dragon each retreated more than 10 meters. They faced each other on opposite sides of the hall. The atmosphere was solemn. The dark flood dragon stopped abruptly. Its lantern-sized eyes were filled with anger. It swung its huge tail and pounced towards Zhuo Wen again. The human ancient martial art practitioner in front of it was too abominable. It had to tear him apart completely. If you want to fight, I'll keep you company. Zhuo Wen was not to be outdone. With his current physical fitness, he was not afraid of the black flood dragon even if he had to fight it head-on. He took a step in the air and collided with the black flood dragon once again like an arrow leaving the bow. Boom! Boom! In an instant, Zhuo Wen and the dark flood dragon had exchanged over 10 moves. Every move was like a landslide, causing a huge commotion. A ring-shaped airwave spread out, as though the surrounding space was about to collapse. Such a violent commotion immediately attracted the attention of the few people who were fighting with the other 3 dark flood dragons. When they glanced at Zhuo Wen's battle from the corner of their eyes, their pupils suddenly shrank because they saw an extremely shocking scene. Zhuo Wen was actually fighting the dark flood dragon in close-quarters combat. Furthermore, it looked like they were evenly matched. What kind of physical body did one need to be able to fight the dark flood dragon in close-quarters combat? The strength of Zhuo Wen's physical body is above my expectations. He can actually fight the dark flood dragon head-on. It seems that this person can't be underestimated. Feng Long, who was holding the halberd in his hand, was evenly matched with the dark black flood dragon. When he saw Zhuo Wen using his physical body to take on the dark black flood dragon, a hint of shock emerged in his heart. Zhuo Wen must have cultivated an extremely powerful body refining technique. That's why his physical body is so tough. However, in terms of cultivation level, he should still be a level lower than me. This time, I can't let him beat me to it. I have to get rid of the dark flood dragon as soon as possible. Seeing Zhuo Wen's battle situation, a trace of fighting spirit surfaced in Feng Long's eyes. He waved the halberd in his hand continuously. Every move he executed contained an extremely frightening power, which directly forced the black dragon to retreat continuously. In an instant, the black dragon went from being at a disadvantage to having the upper hand. Lower Emperor armor skill, Stormy Waves halberd. Directly kill everything. Perhaps due to Zhuo Wen's provocation, Feng Long didn't hold back anymore. His right hand that was holding the halberd suddenly tightened, and he directly drew a strange mark in the air. Instantly, the surrounding origin energy started to boil, and countless origin energy seemed to form waves of frenzied waves around Feng Long. With Feng Long as the center, the area within 100 feet was completely submerged by the endless waves. Feng Long stepped on the waves with a fierce gaze and an arrogant posture. Roar! Suddenly, being surrounded by such a turbulent wave, the dark flood dragon suddenly felt a trace of uneasiness. It roared and directly rushed toward Feng Long, who was in the middle of the wave. It knew that the person who had created such a terrifying wave was this abominable human. As long as it killed this human, the wave would naturally be destroyed. What a death-seeking bastard! The corners of Feng Long's mouth curled into a cold smile. In this endless wave, he was the master of this place. How could he let the dark flood dragon get close to him so easily? Feng Long's sky pisser was held horizontally in his right hand. The turbulent wave formed an extremely thick water wall in front of him, directly blocking the dark flood dragon's attack. At the same time, the waves in all directions formed into thick water pythons, one after another, restraining the dark flood dragon, making it unable to move. "Go to hell!" Feng Long shouted loudly. The sky pisser in his right hand suddenly flew toward the bound dark flood dragon. The sky pisser directly turned into a golden light and directly rushed into the dark flood dragon's vital point. Puff. Chapter 400. Struggle-a-woo. The dark flood dragon let out a mournful cry and fell heavily into the waves. It struggled continuously and finally lost all signs of life. The endless waves receded, and Feng Long walked out with a pale face. He was gasping for breath, and his chest was heaving up and down. It was obvious that he had paid a great price for using the Emperor-grade armor skill just now. The fact that Feng Long had ended the battle so quickly made Zhu Li and the others feel refreshed. The four of them attacked the Black Flood Dragon even more fiercely. However, the strength of the four of them was too weak. Even if the four of them worked together, they were still at a disadvantage. In fact, the battle on their side was in a precarious situation. Zhuoan, who was in a remote corner, couldn't help but squint his eyes. He couldn't help but mutter to himself, Nine Dragons City is worthy of being called the top advanced city. They actually have such a precious lower Emperor armor skill. The power of the Stormy Waves halberd that Feng Long had used just now made Zhuoan quite envious. Since it could kill the Dark Flood Dragon in one move, it could be seen that the power of the Stormy Waves halberd was not inferior to his Ice and Fire Lotus. Moreover, this was only a low Emperor level armor skill. If it was a higher level armor skill, wouldn't its power be earth-shattering? Awoo. Perhaps it was because of the death of the Dark Flood Dragon that Feng Long was fighting, but the other three Dark Flood Dragons actually let out a sorrowful cry together. Their eyes turned extremely red, and they all went berserk. Their strength was at least 30% higher than before. Boom. The Dark Flood Dragon, whose strength had skyrocketed, swung its claw and smashed onto the defenses of Zhu Li and the others. With a crisp cracking sound, the defenses of Zhu Li and the others collapsed inch by inch. Poochie. Under this kind of bombardment, Zhu Li and the other three were sent flying while coughing up blood. The defense that they had been maintaining immediately collapsed. Awoo. The Black Flood Dragon's eyes were red and filled with rage and killing intent. Its huge black tail was like a huge whip as it swung towards the woman in red, Zhu Li. Be careful. Seeing that the Black Flood Dragon's huge tail was about to hit Zhu Li's body, Feng Long let out a loud shout. The Fangtian halberd in his hand flew forward and directly hit the Flood Dragon's huge tail, causing it to deviate from its original trajectory and miss Zhu Li's body. Whoosh! Feng Long stepped lightly and leaped into the air. He placed his right hand on Zhu Li's back and stabilized her body. Then, he stared solemnly at the black dragon in front of him. Are you all right? Feng Long asked Zhu Li with a serious expression. I'm fine. It's just that we didn't expect the Dark Flood Dragon to suddenly go berserk. Its strength has increased by a lot. Zhu Li shook her head and said bitterly. Awoo. Another resounding roar rang out. The strength of the Black Serpent Dragon that Pang Tong and the other two were holding back had increased by quite a bit. At that moment, it was violently slamming into the defensive circle formed by Pang Tong and the other two. Under the collision, the defensive circle formed by the three of them began to tremble. Pang Tong and the others can't hold on much longer. Zhu Li, quickly take the other three to assist Pang Tong and the others. Stall that Dark Flood Dragon. Leave this Dark Flood Dragon to me. Feng Long's expression changed slightly. He hurriedly ordered Zhu Li, who was beside him, to draw out the Fangtian halberd and charge towards the dark flood dragon. Zhu Li glanced worriedly at Feng Long's back. She knew that Feng Long had just used the halberd of stormy waves, a low-level Emperor-grade armor technique. After all, Feng Long was only a half-step ultimate Emperor realm cultivator. Although he could break through to the ultimate Emperor realm at any time, he could barely use an Emperor-grade armor technique. The burden of using an Emperor-grade armor technique was extremely heavy for a half-step ultimate Emperor realm cultivator. Even the lowest-level Emperor-grade armor technique would cause a great backlash when used by a half-step ultimate Emperor realm cultivator. If Feng Long hadn't reached the point where he could break through to the ultimate Emperor realm at any time, he probably wouldn't have been able to fight anymore. Sigh. Big brother Feng, you should be careful too. Zhu Li gritted her teeth and nodded solemnly. Then, she led the other three from Nine Dragons City and charged towards Pang Tong and the other two who were locked in a bitter battle. With the addition of Zhu Li and the other three, Pang Tong's battle became much easier. Boom. 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 Feng Long and the berserk Black Flood Dragon clashed again. Because he had used the halberd of stormy waves, Feng Long was at a complete disadvantage and could only passively take a beating. At this moment, Feng Long's face was as pale as snow. After using the halberd of stormy waves, he had suffered a great backlash. The yuan power in his dantian had been greatly depleted and it was extremely difficult for him to deal with the Black Flood Dragon's attacks. Bang! The Black Flood Dragon swung its tail and drilled through the gap in Feng Long's defense, slamming heavily into his chest. Poochie! Feng Long spat out a mouthful of blood and flew backwards like a withered leaf. He left a trail of blood on the ground and formed a huge crater. Big brother Feng. On the other side, in the seven-man battle between Zhu Li and Pang Tong, the red-clothed woman, Zhu Li, saw Feng Long fly out. Her pretty face changed greatly, and she couldn't help but cry out in alarm. She directly ignored the seven-man battle and rushed toward Feng Long, who had fallen into the pit. Damn it! This despicable woman! Pang Tong's expression changed slightly as he cursed in his heart. As soon as Zhu Li left, the pressure on Pang Tong's team increased sharply. The remaining 6 people were instantly at a disadvantage. At the same time, the Black Flood Dragon's huge tail was ready to strike. It was like a whip that swung towards Feng Long who was in the crater. Whoosh! Just as the Black Flood Dragon's tail slammed into the crater, a fiery red figure rushed into the crater and pulled Feng Long out of it in the blink of an eye. Boom! The huge tail slammed into the crater and the powerful force immediately expanded the crater by several times. Countless gravel flew in all directions along with the airwaves. Awoo! Seeing that its prey had been rescued, the Black Flood Dragon roared angrily. It swung its huge tail and rushed towards Zhu Li and Feng Long who were fleeing not far away. At the same time, waves of ink-black poisonous gas gushed out from its bloody mouth. In the blink of an eye, a thick poisonous gas enveloped Zhu Li and Feng Long. Zhuoan, who was facing off against the Black Flood Dragon, saw Zhu Li and Feng Long who were shrouded in poisonous gas not far away. His eyes narrowed as he muttered to himself, Feng Long shouldn't be defeated so easily. Sure enough, the moment Zhuowen's words left his mouth, the ink-black poison gas nearby immediately began to churn. Immediately, waves of churning waves surged out from within the poison gas, directly expelling the surrounding black poison gas. Stormy waves halberd, break, break, break. A deep roar suddenly came out from the poisonous gas. Soon after, Feng Long grabbed Zhu Li's waist with his right hand and slowly walked out from the endless waves with a gloomy face. He gently placed the unconscious Zhu Li on the ground. With a stomp of his foot, countless waves formed a huge water halberd in front of him. Whoosh! The huge water halberd was like an arrow released from a bow. It turned into a golden light and directly pierced through the berserk Black Flood Dragon. After all, the stormy waves halberd was an Emperor armor skill. Even if the Black Flood Dragon was in a berserk state, it was unlikely that it could withstand the power of the Emperor armor skill. Boom! Without exception, the halberd of stormy waves directly ignored the defense of the Black Flood Dragon's scales and directly pierced through its vital point. Naturally, the Black Flood Dragon's fate was sealed, and it quickly lost its life force. Puff! After using the lower Emperor armor skill, the stormy waves halbered, twice in a row, Feng Long finally couldn't withstand the powerful backlash. He directly spat out a mouthful of blood and his eyes became much dimmer than before. Brother Zhuo, 2 black flood dragons are my limit. I'll leave the remaining 2 to you. After saying this, Feng Long directly sat down cross-legged and took out the healing elixirs from his Chenkuan bag. He actually started to heal himself without any distractions. He didn't plan to care about the other 2 black flood dragons at all. He knew that Zhuowen's strength was not much weaker than his. Moreover, with the help of Pang Tong and the other 5 people, it shouldn't be a problem to kill the remaining 2 black flood dragons. Not far away, Zhuowen heard this and the corner of his mouth twitched. After hearing Feng Long's words, he didn't have the nerve to continue playing with the black flood dragon. Brother Feng, don't worry. With a chuckle, Zhuowen's muscles suddenly swelled. Then, he suddenly opened the thunder serpent wings and the thunder flood dragon's wings. With a flash of lightning, he dodged the black flood dragon's attack and instantly circled behind the black flood dragon. Suddenly, Zhuowen fell like a free fall. With his steel-like knee down, he violently smashed the black flood dragon's head. Boom! The black flood dragon's huge eyes suddenly bulged out. Blood vessels could be seen in the depths of its eyes, making it look extremely terrifying. Its huge head suddenly fell down, smashing a huge hole in the ground. At this time, Zhuowen's strength was so great that it could reach more than 1,000,000 pounds. The full force of the 1,000-pound fall was enough to shatter mountains and crush bluestones. Even if the black flood dragon had a thick skin, it probably couldn't withstand such a huge force. With a soft groan, the black flood dragon lay motionless in the hole. Obviously, it couldn't be more dead. After killing the black flood dragon, Zhuowen's feet stepped in the air and directly headed toward the battle group where Pang Tong and the others were not far away. With a flash of lightning, Zhuowen arrived in front of the last black flood dragon with the thunder wings on his back. He clenched his 5 fingers into a fist and suddenly punched the black flood dragon's head. The powerful force immediately sent the black flood dragon flying and crashing into the side wall of the hall. Zhuowen sent the black flood dragon flying. Pang Tong and the others, who were struggling to hold on, finally felt relieved. However, when they saw Zhuowen easily send the black flood dragon flying with a punch, they still had a trace of disbelief on their faces. It seemed that this Zhuowen's strength was above their expectations. This Zhuowen is actually so strong. Even Feng Long had to use his Emperor-level armor skill when facing the Black Flood Dragon. However, this guy directly sent the Black Flood Dragon flying with a punch with his physical strength. Moreover, he doesn't seem to be injured at all. Is this guy even human? Chapter 401. Calamity of Heaven and Earth. Zhuowen did not slow down after defeating the Black Flood Dragon. He rushed toward the Black Flood Dragon in the side wall like an arrow. He patted his Chenkuan bag with his right hand and a blood-red spear appeared in his palm. Moon Demon Secret Codex, Blood Rupture style. The muscles on Zhuowen's right hand swelled as he fiercely swung the great spear. His powerful Yuan power combined with his physical strength almost tore the surrounding space apart. Soon after, a gigantic blood-colored great spear descended from the sky like a mountain, heavily smashing into the body of the Black Flood Dragon on the side wall. Puff! Under the attack of the blood-red spear, the Black Flood Dragon was blasted into a bloody mess. It couldn't be more dead. Hiss! Zhuowen's magnificent feat of killing 2 dark black Jiao dragons in a row immediately made the others gasp. Feng Long, who was still healing, obviously heard the gasps around him. He couldn't help but open his eyes, and immediately saw the empty hall. Feng Long looked around and saw the other 2 black flood dragons that had died a violent death. His pupils shrank. He hadn't been healing for long and the other 2 black flood dragons had already been killed. Zhuowen, this guy. He actually killed the other 2 black flood dragons so quickly, and he doesn't seem to be injured at all. Feng Long immediately stared at Zhuowen. When he saw that Zhuowen was completely unharmed, the shock in his heart became even more intense. After all, he had only barely managed to kill 2 dark serpents after using his Emperor tier armor skill. However, Zhuowen had easily killed the same number of dark serpents. Taking a deep breath, Feng Long's gaze suddenly became incomparably complicated. He was the #1 genius of Nine Dragons City and was highly regarded by the city's upper echelons. The other younger generation had to look up to him and look at his back. Therefore, he had always been aloof and thought that except for the top geniuses of the super cities, the geniuses of other cities simply couldn't be compared to him. He didn't even take Pang Tong, the captain of Thunder Universe City's team, whose strength wasn't any weaker than Nine Dragons City's team, to heart. Although Pang Tong's strength wasn't bad, his realm was much lower than his, so he had never treated him as an opponent. But Zhuowen, a boy from a low-level city, had appeared out of nowhere and surprised him time and time again. Not only had he broken through the mother nest's lava pool alone, but he had also shown strength that was on par with his own. Now, he had easily taken care of 2 black flood dragons. It was obvious that this unknown boy in front of him was far stronger than him. For the first time, Feng Long felt a sense of defeat in his heart. This feeling of depression made Feng Long feel like his heart was being torn apart. However, he forcefully suppressed this impulse in his heart. In the end, he glanced at Zhuowen's back as a trace of determination appeared in his eyes. "I'm the #1 genius in Nine Dragons City. I'm the strongest in this team. I won't let anyone surpass me." As he thought to himself, Feng Long closed his eyes once again. Waves of faintly discernible aura surged out from his body and actually formed small whirlwinds around him. Countless yuan power in the surroundings converged into Feng Long's body like a tide. After taking care of the black flood dragon, Zhuowen didn't pay attention to Pang Long and the others who were a little sluggish. Instead, he very quickly dug out the black flood dragon's Niden. At the same time, he unceremoniously inserted the moon demon dragon spine spear into the flood dragon's body to absorb the power of the flood dragon's bloodline. The black flood dragon also had the bloodline of a true dragon. However, it was much thinner than the evil creature sealed in the Qingshui tribe. Although it was very thin, Zhuowen naturally wouldn't let go of the true dragon's bloodline in the black flood dragon. After absorbing the power of the 4 black flood dragons' bloodline, the moon demon dragon spine spear was still a high middle rank soul treasure. However, it was already on the verge of a breakthrough. It probably only needed to absorb a trace of the true dragon's bloodline for the moon demon dragon spine spear to transform into a high rank soul treasure. At that time, the power of the moon demon secret manual's moves would increase by another level. After dealing with the black flood dragon, Zhuowen nodded in satisfaction. However, he soon frowned slightly. Hey! What a strong fluctuation of Yuan Li. This fluctuation. Boom. In the blink of an eye, the Yuan Li in the entire hall suddenly became restless. It was as if it was boiling water. At the same time, the huge amount of Yuan Li gathered towards a corner of the hall like rivers flowing into the sea. It's Feng Long. Is he planning to break through to the ultimate emperor realm here? Pang Tong immediately noticed Feng Long in a remote corner, because at this moment, countless Yuan Qi formed a golden hurricane around Feng Long, endlessly drilling into Feng Long's body, and Feng Long's aura also rapidly rose at this moment. At this moment, everyone's gazes were focused on Feng Long in the corner. In particular, the remaining cultivators of Nine Dragons City had a trace of worry in their eyes. They all knew that Feng Long's cultivation was extremely high. He could break through to the ultimate emperor realm at any time, but he hadn't done so because of the tribulation of heaven and earth. After a cultivator cultivated to the ultimate emperor realm, their lifespan would increase greatly. If there were no accidents, it was possible for them to live for over 1,000 years. However, increasing one's lifespan was something that defied the heavens. Therefore, when a cultivator tried to break through to the ultimate emperor realm, the laws of heaven and earth would obstruct them. This obstruction was the tribulation of heaven and earth. The tribulation of heaven and earth was extremely terrifying. It was said that terrifying lightning and other strange energies would descend. Just a strand of these energies was enough to tear apart an ordinary half-step ultimate emperor realm cultivator. Moreover, the more monstrous a cultivator's talent was, the more monstrous the tribulation of heaven and earth would descend. On the other hand, the tribulation of heaven and earth that descended for cultivators with ordinary talent was much weaker when they tried to break through to the ultimate emperor realm. There might even be no tribulation of heaven and earth at all. Therefore, the tribulation of heaven and earth was actually a test for monstrous geniuses. The higher one's talent was, the more monstrous the test would be, and the longer their lifespan would be increased. It was precisely because the tribulation of heaven and earth was so monstrous that many monstrous geniuses wouldn't be in a hurry to break through to the ultimate emperor realm. Instead, they would slowly build up their foundation. However, once their foundation reached a certain level, their chances of surviving the tribulation of heaven and earth would increase. Their strength would also far surpass ordinary ultimate emperor realm cultivators. He's actually undergoing the tribulation of heaven and earth in Nether Castle. This Feng Long is quite bold. Zhuoan nodded and muttered to himself as he watched Feng Long break through in the corner. At the same time, Zhuoan's eyes flashed with a faint trace of anticipation. He had also reached the level where he could break through to the ultimate emperor realm at any time. If he wanted to, he could break through right now and begin his tribulation of heaven and earth. However, Zhuoan could faintly sense that Feng Long's tribulation of heaven and earth would be much more terrifying than that of ordinary geniuses. This was because Feng Long's current strength was simply too shocking. He was clearly only a half-step ultimate emperor realm cultivator, but he possessed strength comparable to a peak ultimate emperor realm cultivator. His strength was far greater than Feng Long's, so his tribulation of heaven and earth would definitely be much more terrifying than Feng Long's. Even the current Zhuoan didn't have much confidence in his upcoming tribulation of heaven and earth. I can use Feng Long's tribulation of heaven and earth as a reference and see what it's like. Perhaps it will be of some use to me when I undergo the tribulation of heaven and earth in the future. Zhuoan stared unblinkingly at Feng Long's figure in the corner. He really wanted to see what kind of test the tribulation of heaven and earth would give to a cultivator. In the hall, besides Zhuoan, Pang Tong and the others were also staring intently at Feng Long. Many of them were half-step ultimate emperor realm cultivators, so they would naturally experience the tribulation of heaven and earth in the future. Being able to personally witness the process of the tribulation of heaven and earth would bring unimaginable benefits to their future breakthroughs. The originally unconscious Ju Li had already been awakened by the members of Nine Dragons City. She stood beside them and stared worriedly at Feng Long. Feng Long's tribulation of heaven and earth is about to begin. It wasn't clear who said this, but everyone immediately stared intently at Feng Long. Countless strands of thick golden yuan qi had already surrounded Feng Long's entire body. A transparent barrier seemed to have appeared with Feng Long at the center, preventing anyone from entering. Rumble. An enormous bolt of lightning the size of a bucket descended from the sky, directly striking down on Feng Long's head. Feng Long, who had been sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed, suddenly opened his eyes and took out a halberd. With a sweep of his right hand, a powerful force directly shattered the bolt of lightning. Rumble. Bucket-sized bolts of lightning continuously descended from the area where Feng Long was, but they were all blocked and annihilated by Feng Long. In an instant, Feng Long's aura rose to its peak, becoming even more powerful than before. Although Feng Long had suffered heavy injuries during the battle with the Black Flood Dragon, the tribulation of heaven and earth had a special characteristic. No matter how serious a cultivator's injuries were, once they began to undergo the tribulation of heaven and earth, they would be protected by the laws of heaven and earth. Their internal injuries would be completely healed by the power of heaven and earth, allowing them to resist the tribulation of heaven and earth in their peak condition. At this moment, Feng Long's aura had become even sharper. He brandished his halberd with every move, completely blocking the bombardment of lightning. Moreover, the more he fought, the more courageous he became. Rumble. When Feng Long's aura rose to its peak, a myriad of bolts of lightning immediately descended from the area where he stood. They were like countless dark blue pythons as they struck towards Feng Long in the center of the area. Halberd of stormy waves. Block everything. Feng Long remained extremely calm in the face of the myriad of bolts of lightning descending from the sky. He stood tall with his halberd in his right hand. Instantly, countless surging waves surged towards him, forming walls of water around him. These walls of water weren't static, but constantly flowing. Countless bolts of lightning struck the walls of water. Although many of the walls of water were destroyed, The endless waves in the surroundings continued to form more walls of water. They actually managed to completely block the myriad of bolts of lightning in the area for a moment. When the bolts of lightning gradually receded, a halberd-wielding figure stood there silently. An oppressive aura surged out from the figure. This aura had already surpassed the level of a half-step ultimate Emperor realm cultivator. Chapter 402. Breaking the contract. Feng Long's heavenly tribulation wasn't that difficult. Bolts of lightning fell one after another, each one denser than the last. From a single bolt to tens of thousands of bolts. This kind of heavenly tribulation might be as difficult as ascending to the heavens for an ordinary half-step ultimate Emperor realm cultivator, but it wasn't much of a challenge for Zhuowen. Feng Long's face was filled with an excited smile. Clearly, he hadn't expected the heavenly tribulation to not be as terrifying as the rumors said. Due to his solid foundation, Feng Long had directly skipped the initial stage of the Ultimate Emperor realm and reached the mid-stage of the Ultimate Emperor realm. His strength had multiplied by several times. The 4 members of Nine Dragons City, led by Zhu Li, were all overjoyed. Even they hadn't expected Feng Long to be able to overcome the heavenly tribulation so easily and smoothly ascend to the Ultimate Emperor realm. Some were happy while others were worried. Pang Tong and the other 2 from Thunder Universe City all had gloomy expressions. They knew that Feng Long had already ascended to the Ultimate Emperor realm. Their chances of obtaining the Holy City's strength had become very slim. Big brother Feng, congratulations on successfully breaking through to the Ultimate Emperor realm. Zhu Li led her 4 team members over to Feng Long and smiled at him with a radiant smile. Haha, I was just lucky. Perhaps it's because we're in the Nether Ancient Castle, but the heavenly tribulation this time wasn't very difficult. That's why I was lucky enough to break through to the Ultimate Emperor realm. Feng Long shook his head and spoke rather modestly. However, the expression on his face completely betrayed his current mood. After he finished speaking, Feng Long's gaze swept across Zhuowen, Pang Tong, and the other 2 in the hall. There was a trace of indifference in his eyes. After ascending to the Ultimate Emperor realm, Feng Long was undoubtedly the strongest person in the hall. Even Zhuowen had to admit that Feng Long was indeed very strong. If he didn't use the blood flames, it would probably be very difficult for him to defeat Feng Long. Brother Pang, Brother Zhuo, if you want to obtain the Holy City's strength, you must first defeat the Nether King. However, the Nether King is on the 3rd floor of the Nether Castle. Although the 2 of you are quite skilled, I'm afraid it's not enough to deal with the Nether King. Therefore, for your sake, I hope that you don't need to enter the Nether Castle. 9 Dragons City is enough. Feng Long's face was filled with a calm smile. His tone was polite but contained an unquestionable tone. Feng, what do you mean by that? Don't tell me that you intend to chase us out and deal with the Nether King alone in order to seize the strength of the Holy City. Pang Tong's expression changed slightly when he heard this, and he spoke in an unfriendly tone. Because he wasn't strong, in the beginning, he was because he wasn't strong. Now that his strength had skyrocketed to the mid-emperor, he felt, and Zhuowen, Pang, and Zhu because he was, because he, and the. Don't tell me that I have to bring you burdens to deal with the Netherworld King. With it. The corners of Feng Long's mouth cracked as he stared coldly at Pang Tong and the others. Pang Tong's expression became extremely ugly. However, he knew that he was weaker than Feng Long to begin with. Now that Feng Long had broken through to the mid-emperor realm, his strength had multiplied by several times. He wasn't someone Pang Tong could deal with right now. Captain, let's leave. Feng Long has broken through to the emperor realm. Even if the 3 of us work together, we won't be able to withstand a single blow from him. It's very likely that we'll be killed, one of the team members beside Pang Tong advised in a low voice. Pang Tong's eyes flickered. He suddenly turned to Zhuowen and said, Zhuowen, are you really going to give up on the Holy City's power? Did I say I was going to give up on the Holy City's power? Zhuowen seemed extremely calm as he replied indifferently. Feng Long's gaze landed on Zhuowen when he heard that. He didn't care about the others in the hall, but he couldn't help but care about this youth who was even younger than him. Even though he had broken through to the Emperor realm, he still couldn't see through Zhuowen. This made Feng Long feel a trace of fear towards Zhuowen. However, it was only fear. Even though Feng Long was only at the mid-ultimate Emperor realm, he was able to display strength that wasn't any weaker than a late ultimate Emperor realm cultivator. No matter how heaven-defying Zhuowen's talent was, it was impossible for him to match a late ultimate Emperor realm cultivator when he was only at the half-step ultimate Emperor realm. Therefore, Feng Long was extremely confident that Zhuowen was no match for him now that he had broken through. Are none of you willing to give up? If that's the case, then don't blame me for being impolite. Feng Long's eyes turned extremely cold. He stepped off the air and instantly arrived above Pang Tong. The fingers of his right hand clenched into a fist as he threw out a punch. The surging power of the world stirred up the surrounding Yuan power, forming a fist the size of a small hill. It enveloped Pang Tong and the other two without any warning. Rumble. The ground where Pang Tong and the other two were standing instantly formed a crater that was several dozen meters wide. Cracks spread across the ground like a spiderweb. It was an extremely terrifying sight to behold. The two weaker members of Pang Tong's side were directly blasted to bits by the force of the attack. They were deader than dead. Pang Tong had decisively taken out a defensive soul treasure from his cosmos pouch, barely managing to block Feng Long's attack. However, he spat out a mouthful of blood and his face was as pale as snow. Feng Long, I, Pang Tong, will be at odds with your 9 Dragons city from now on. Just you wait. Pang Tong roared at the sky, his voice filled with hatred. He then decisively erased the words on his identity medallion and was directly sent out of the origin tower by a pillar of light. I told you to leave long ago, but you just wouldn't listen. Now you're only willing to leave after I kill 2 of your members. How despicable. Feng Long shook his head and turned towards Zhuowen. Brother Zhuo, I know you're pretty strong. You're even stronger than I was before I broke through. However, I've already broken through. You haven't experienced the energy of the world, so you don't know the enormous difference between an ultimate emperor and a half-step ultimate emperor. Even if your physical body is pretty good, it's not even worth mentioning in my opinion. Brother Zhuo, you're a smart person. You should know what to do, right? Feng Long stared at Zhuowen, patiently waiting for Zhuowen's reply. In his opinion, Zhuowen would wisely choose to leave after seeing how he'd defeated Pang Tong and the other two. Zhuowen. It's not like you don't know the difference between a half-step ultimate emperor and an ultimate emperor. I think you should just leave the origin tower, otherwise, Big Brother Feng will never show any mercy. The red-clothed girl, Zhu Li, advised. Zhu Li actually admired Zhuowen. After all, there was basically no other cultivator from a low-level city who could cultivate to such an abnormal level like Zhuowen. Therefore, she didn't want a genius like Zhuowen to fall at Feng Long's hands. Zhuowen's expression was extremely calm. He glanced at Feng Long and said, Brother Feng, I'm afraid you don't have the right to make me, Zhuowen, leave the origin tower just like that. Zhu Li shook her head repeatedly when she heard Zhuowen's words. She looked at Zhuowen with great disappointment. She had clearly explained the huge gap between a half-step ultimate emperor realm cultivator and an ultimate emperor realm cultivator, but Zhuowen didn't listen at all. It looked like he couldn't escape the fate of being killed by Feng Long. Looks like you still want to stay. Since that's the case, don't blame me. As he spoke, Feng Long drew his halberd and stomped his foot. His entire body turned into a series of afterimages as he waved the halberd in his right hand repeatedly. Countless halberd shadows appeared in front of him and enveloped Zhuowen. Zhuowen wasn't afraid at all. He raised his blood-red spear and swung it in the air. An enormous force directly annihilated the halberd shadows that filled the sky. Shortly after, his lightning serpent wings and lightning flood dragon wings suddenly opened up and turned into a series of lightning shadows in the air. He arrived behind Feng Long in the blink of an eye. With a flick of his fingers, the blood-red spear fiercely spun and swept towards the back of Feng Long's head. Feng Long had already expected Zhuowen's strength, so he was extremely vigilant. He abruptly circulated the energy of heaven and earth in his body, and the surrounding dense origin chi transformed into a several-meter-thick golden shield behind him. It instantly blocked the blood-red spear's attack. Clang! The sound of metal clashing resounded and dazzling sparks flew. The blood-red spear was unable to move an inch against the golden shield. Zhuowen. The strength of an ultimate Emperor Realm cultivator is beyond your imagination. Right now, I can use the energy of heaven and earth in my body to circulate the surrounding origin chi at any time. As long as I want, your blood-red spear won't be able to break through my defense and harm me in the slightest. Feng Long chuckled as he glanced at Zhuowen and spoke sinisterly. However, Zhuowen wasn't annoyed at all. Instead, a trace of a mocking smile appeared on the corners of his mouth as he said, "You're not the only one with the energy of heaven and earth. I have it too." As he spoke, Zhuowen's consciousness sank into his dantian and circulated the grey energy that had been constantly nourished within it. At this moment, 70% of his dantian was filled with this grey energy. This grey energy had been nourished by the energy of heaven and earth that LV Yongsheng had injected into his body. As soon as the grey energy was stimulated, it instantly became restless. It actually directly flowed through Zhuowen's meridians from his dantian and surged into Zhuowen's right hand. Soon after, it gathered at the tip of the blood-red spear. In an instant, the tip of the spear had turned a strange grey color. Crack! After being strengthened by the energy of heaven and earth, the blood-red spear's sharpness had practically reached a terrifying state. Zhuowen's right hand suddenly slapped the end of the spear, causing it to instantly spin rapidly. After that, the extremely thick golden shield behind Feng Long actually shattered into pieces. The energy of heaven and earth. How is this possible? You're clearly just a half-step ultimate Emperor Realm cultivator. How can you possess the energy of heaven and earth that only ultimate Emperor Realm cultivators possess? Chapter 403. Obtaining the Origin Energy Sphere. Whoosh! The blood-red spear shattered the golden shield and swept towards the back of Feng Long's head like a hot knife through butter. Even if Feng Long was an ultimate Emperor Realm cultivator, he would still lose his life if he was struck by this spear. Feng Long snorted coldly. He twisted his waist in a strange manner and changed direction in midair, dodging the blood-red spear. Then, he took several steps in the air and retreated more than 10 meters. He stared at Zhuowen with fear in his eyes. "You've also broken through to the ultimate Emperor Realm? You've been hiding your strength all this time?" Feng Long's gaze was extremely serious. He was truly shocked when Zhuowen used the power of heaven and earth. Only cultivators at the ultimate Emperor Realm and above could use the power of heaven and earth. In other words, it was very likely that Zhuowen was a true ultimate Emperor Realm cultivator like him. Zhu Li and the others opened their eyes when they heard Feng Long's words. They stared at Zhuowen in disbelief. It was already shocking enough that this youth from a low-level city had reached the half-step Emperor Realm. But now, they could hear from Feng Long's words that Zhuowen was also an ultimate Emperor Realm cultivator. This was just too inconceivable. An ultimate Emperor Realm expert was considered one of the top experts in the Qing Xian Empire. Compared to the vast territory of the Qing Xian Empire, the number of such experts was much smaller. The amount of resources needed to nurture an ultimate Emperor Realm expert was enormous. Even a high-grade city would find it difficult to bear. Only a superpower like a super city would be able to nurture an ultimate Emperor Realm expert of the younger generation. Nine Dragons City was considered one of the most powerful high-class cities. However, the number one expert of the younger generation, Feng Long, was only a half-step Emperor Realm cultivator. He had only broken through to the ultimate Emperor Realm after entering the Origin Energy Tower. But Zhuowen, who came from a low-level city, was also an ultimate Emperor Realm cultivator. This kind of bizarre matter really shocked Zhu Li and the others. When did low-level cities become so powerful? How could they nurture a terrifying genius like Zhuowen? "Are you still going to stop me now?" Zhuowen asked as he stared calmly at Feng Long. He did not admit or deny it. Feng Long's eyes flickered when he heard this. Then, he stared deeply at Zhuowen and said, "I never imagined that Brother Zhuo had concealed his strength so deeply. You've actually reached the ultimate Emperor realm as well. Since that's the case, I naturally won't stop Brother Zhuo. We'll meet again on the 3rd level. After saying that, Feng Long directly led Zhu Li and the other 3 to a flight of stairs at the end of the hall. Zhuowen had no intention of chasing after Feng Long. There was no need for him to fall out with Feng Long just yet. After all, their target this time was the Netherworld King. Furthermore, Feng Long, who had broken through to the mid-stage of the first cycle Extreme Emperor realm, wasn't that easy to deal with. Even if Zhuowen's strength was comparable to a peak first cycle Extreme Emperor realm expert, it would still be very difficult for him to deal with Feng Long in a short amount of time. This Feng Long is rather scheming. He seems amiable on the surface, but is actually ruthless and decisive. It's best if I don't associate myself with him, or I'll really be tricked to death. Zhuowen shook his head as he watched Feng Long and the others leave. He sighed emotionally in his heart. He planned to leave the hall and head to the 2nd level. Kid, don't you want a treasure like the Yuan energy ball? Xiao Hei's voice suddenly rang out just as Zhuowen was about to take a step forward. Zhuowen's foot came to a sudden stop. He was stunned at first, but then he became overjoyed. He said, "You have a way to retrieve the Yuan energy ball in the hall?" After all, the Netherworld King placed a formation and restriction within the Yuan energy ball. It's practically impossible to break through the restriction from the outside. Zhuowen greatly coveted a treasure like the Yuan energy ball. One had to know that the Yuan energy ball contained extremely dense and pure Yuan energy. This Yuan energy had been specially refined by ancient experts. It was a treasure that ancient experts had refined for their juniors to aid in their cultivation. It could be quickly absorbed and converted into one's own strength. With a treasure like the Yuan energy ball, one could save at least 2 years of cultivation time. In other words, as long as one absorbed all the Yuan energy within the Yuan energy ball, the increase in one's cultivation level would be comparable to the Yuan energy that an ordinary cultivator would absorb in 2 years of cultivation in a short period of time. As long as he had this Yuan energy ball, once Zhuowen broke through to the ultimate Emperor realm, he would be able to borrow the surging Yuan energy within the ball to quickly convert it into the energy of heaven and earth. In a short period of time, Zhuowen had hopes of breaking through to the ultimate Emperor realm. As long as Zhuowen's strength reached the ultimate Emperor realm, even LV Yongsheng would find it extremely difficult to kill him. Have you forgotten that this Lord Dragon is currently in the form of a spirit? The Yuan energy on the surface of the Yuan energy ball is completely unable to stop a spirit from entering. As long as this Lord Dragon enters the Yuan energy ball, I will be able to break the restriction from the inside. Just now, this Lord Dragon has already investigated the situation within the Yuan energy ball and discovered that the restriction inside is not complicated. As long as this Lord Dragon makes a move, the restriction will naturally be easily broken. Xiao Hei came out from between Zhuowen's brows with its nose in the air and a smug look on its face. Zhuowen wanted nothing more than to give it a few kicks. However, for the sake of the Yuan energy ball's ownership, Zhuowen suppressed this impulse in the end. Then you better hurry up. Don't dilly-dally. You have to know that Feng Long and the others have already gone straight to the 2nd level. With Feng Long's current strength, breaking through to the 2nd level is only a matter of time. When that time comes and we get rid of the Lord of the Underworld, the power of the Holy City will be seized by Feng Long and the others, Zhuowen said somewhat anxiously. Why are you panicking? That Lord of the Underworld is not so easy to deal with. With that brat Feng Long's strength, wanting to take down the Lord of the Underworld is simply wishful thinking. Perhaps if you go up later, you might be able to be the fisherman for a while. Alright, I will enter the Yuan energy ball to take a look and try to break it. Xiao Hei rolled its eyes at Zhuowen. Then, it turned into a black streak of light and entered the Yuan energy ball. After about half an incense stick's worth of time, the huge Yuan energy ball in the middle of the hall trembled violently. It was actually shrinking at a speed visible to the naked eye. In the end, it turned into a transparent crystal ball the size of a palm. This crystal ball was filled with dense and dazzling golden gas, appearing extremely gorgeous and colorful. Brat, the restriction within the Yuan energy ball has already been broken. You only need to refine the Yuan energy ball a little, then the yuan energy contained within it will be freely absorbed by you. If you intend to concentrate on absorbing the yuan energy within it, you will need about a month's time. Xiaohei smiled faintly. After receiving the elemental energy ball, Zhuo Wen could immediately feel the surging elemental energy contained within the elemental energy ball. It was as vast as the boundless ocean. The elemental energy within his body silently entered the elemental energy ball as Zhuo Wen concentrated on refining the elemental energy ball in his hand. The refining of the yuan energy ball did not take up too much of Zhuo Wen's time. After refining the yuan energy ball, Zhuo Wen's mind moved slightly. The yuan energy contained within the yuan energy ball immediately flowed into Zhuo Wen's meridians. Moreover, Zhuo Wen could feel that the yuan energy that flowed into his body was actually purer and denser than the yuan energy in his body. Zhuo Wen refined it slightly, and the yuan energy immediately entered his dantian and transformed into the grey-colored power of heaven and earth. What a pure yuan energy! It actually directly entered his dantian and transformed into the power of heaven and earth. This transformation speed far surpasses my usual cultivation speed. No wonder the yuan energy ball was an extremely precious treasure in the ancient times. With such an efficient transformation speed, I wonder how much time a cultivator would need to cultivate. Zhuo Wen muttered to himself in surprise. With this yuan energy ball, Zhuo Wen believed that once he successfully broke through to the ultimate emperor realm, he could directly use the yuan energy within the ball to advance to the ultimate emperor realm. Brat! With the strength of your physical body that has reached the 7th level of the Jade Stone body tempering technique, you are actually not afraid of the tribulation of heaven and earth. Even if you directly break through to the ultimate emperor realm now, there is an extremely high chance of success, Xiaohei suddenly said. I know. However, let's deal with the Lord of the Underworld first. After dealing with the Lord of the Underworld, I plan to break through. Zhuo Wen shook his head. Then it's up to you. An entire incense stick's worth of time has passed. I'm afraid that Feng Long and the others have already broken through to the 3rd level. It's just right for you to go now. Xiaohei chuckled. Zhuo Wen shrugged non-committally. With a single step, he turned into a blur and swept past the stairs at the end of the hall. The 2nd level was an extremely vast space. This space was many times larger than the 1st level's hall. On the ground of this space, there were countless human body parts that glowed with a metallic luster. Other than humans, there were also many beast body parts. These body parts were scattered all over the ground. Zhuo Wen casually picked up a body part. He discovered that these body parts were basically made of metal. It was obvious that these body parts had fallen from the puppets. Moreover, there was an extremely large number of these body parts in this space. It was obvious that a great battle had occurred here not long ago. The test of this space is probably these puppets. However, these puppets aren't very strong. They're basically at the Heavenly King realm. The strongest is only at the half-step Ultimate Emperor realm. They didn't pose much of an obstacle to Feng Long and the others. Zhuo Wen muttered as he picked up the body parts. At the end of the space, there was a metal mountain. This mountain was extremely steep and majestic, as if it reached straight into the clouds. On the surface of the mountain, there were steps with distinct levels. These steps extended all the way to the top of the mountain, where the end could not be seen. The other end of this metal mountain should be the entrance to the 3rd level. Zhuo Wen immediately saw the metal mountain peak at the end of this space. Looking at the clear steps, Zhuo Wen's eyes shone brightly. Then let's hurry up. Feng Long and the others might already be fighting the Lord of the Underworld. Xiaohei's voice rang out. Nodding lightly, Zhuo Wen took a step forward and rushed towards the metal mountain peak at an extremely fast speed. On the 3rd level of the Nether Castle, there was a room made of gold on all 4 sides. The room wasn't very big, only a little over 1,000 square meters. In the center of the room, there was a throne made entirely of steel. Chapter 404. The true ruler of Sandstone Island. You've really made it to the 3rd level. You're pretty strong. The Lord of the Underworld stared ahead with his crimson-red eyes as he spoke rather lazily. There was a red carpet path a few meters away from the throne, and there was a rather wide door at the front of the path. At this moment, there were 5 figures standing at the door, and they were Feng Long and the others who had rushed over from the second level. Feng Long suddenly took a step forward and stared coldly at the Lord of the Underworld before the throne. He said, "What an arrogant Lord of the Underworld. You're about to die, yet you're still in the mood to mock us. About to die? I think I should be the one saying that to you." A red glow flashed through the Lord of the Underworld's eyes as he grinned coldly. "It's not up to you to decide whether I'm about to die or not. We'll see who's stronger." Feng Long shouted coldly as he suddenly took a step forward. Boundless origin energy surged out from his body, causing the ground to shatter and pieces of rubble to float around him as if they were weightless. "Oh, so you've broken through. No wonder you're so confident. However, so what if you've broken through? You're still not qualified to be my opponent." The Lord of the Underworld was still lying lazily on the throne as he yawned and spoke indifferently. "Not qualified? Lord of the Underworld, don't be too arrogant. Perhaps you'll regret your attitude towards me after I beat you to the point you kneel and beg for mercy." As soon as he finished speaking, Feng Long's figure flashed and transformed into numerous afterimages in midair. He patted his cosmos bag with his right hand and withdrew a huge halberd from it. He shook his right hand and instantly approached the Lord of the Underworld. Dense halberd images enveloped the throne like a monstrous wave. Rumble. The Lord of the Underworld leaned against the throne with a composed expression. He paid no attention to Feng Long, who was charging straight at him. Just as the halberd images were about to reach him, a robust figure suddenly shot out from beneath the throne, and a huge fist directly smashed onto the halberd image. Bang! Wherever the fist passed, a circular wave of air spread out and smashed onto the halberd images. It directly obliterated the halberd images into nothingness. Thump! Thud, thud, thud. Feng Long clearly did not expect a figure to suddenly appear under the throne. He was caught off guard. He groaned and retreated a dozen steps. His gaze was gloomy as he looked at the figure that had suddenly appeared. This figure was a middle-aged man with short golden hair. His figure was extremely robust, and he was over 3 m tall. The muscles on his entire body were coiled together, causing him to seem savage like countless little loaches. Moreover, every single move he made actually caused the air to whistle, and it was exceptionally ear-piercing. "This is the previous Lord of the Holy City, Alice?" Feng Long said in surprise as his gaze gathered on the face of the golden-haired middle-aged man. Although Aris had mysteriously disappeared 1,000 years ago and Feng Long had never seen Aris in person, there were many statues of Aris in the Holy City. Therefore, Feng Long was quite familiar with Aris' appearance. At this moment, after seeing the face of this blonde middle-aged man, he immediately discovered that this man's face was almost identical to those statues in the Holy City. Obviously, the identity of the blonde middle-aged man in front of him was obvious. He was the Lord of the Holy City, Aris, who had sealed the Lord of the Underworld 1,000 years ago. However, what puzzled Feng Long was that Aris had disappeared after sealing the Lord of the Underworld 1,000 years ago. Why did he appear in the trial grounds now? Moreover, he seemed to be helping the Lord of the Underworld at this moment. Aris had a pair of dark blue eyes. However, these eyes were filled with dullness and dullness. It was as if he was just a lifeless puppet. "You have good eyesight. This is the Lord of the Holy City, Aris. He is also my favorite collection. Hihi, this is the only legendary warrior on the Sandstone Island. If you can defeat him, you will be qualified to be my opponent." The Lord of the Underworld's handsome face was filled with a mocking smile. "Your collection?" Feng Long, Ju Li, and the other 3 at the door seemed to have thought of something when they heard this. Their expressions changed. "Aris' disappearance 1,000 years ago has something to do with you? Also, did you make the previous Aris into a puppet?" Feng Long asked with a solemn look. However, the Lord of the Underworld shook his head and said coldly, "Aris has been under my control for a long time. Do you think I need to make him into a puppet? To tell you the truth, all the lost tribes on this Sandstone Island are just playthings for us, the Underworld race. The so-called seal was just a way for Aris to pacify the people 1,000 years ago. If I want to go out, I can go out at any time. However, There is an extremely powerful seal outside the Sandstone Island. If I can't leave the Sandstone Island, it's useless to go out. Feng Long and the others were stunned when they heard the extremely shocking words of the King of the Underworld. They had never imagined that the King of the Underworld's words would be so different from what the holy maiden Alice had said. Just who was speaking the truth? What about the power of the holy city? Didn't Aris once say that he could control the entire Sandstone Island if he obtained the power of the holy city? Feng Long's eyes flickered as he asked. The power of the holy city? Hey, there's no such thing. However, I know that you little fellows must have come from somewhere outside the Sandstone Island. I don't know how you passed through the seal and entered the Sandstone Island, but I know that you want to obtain control of the Sandstone Island. You want to ascend in broad daylight, right? The Lord of the Underworld said shockingly. Feng Long narrowed his eyes. He suddenly realized that the Lord of the Underworld before him was much smarter than he had imagined. He was clearly a creature of the Sandstone Island, yet he was able to guess that they had come from outside the Sandstone Island. Moreover, he seemed to know about the Ascension Island. There's no need to be so surprised. The reason this king knows that Sandstone Island can be ascended in broad daylight is because this king is now the true ruler of Sandstone Island. All living beings on Sandstone Island are under this king's control. Of course, other than living beings outside Sandstone Island like you, your lives are beyond this king's control. It is because of this that I have determined that you are creatures from outside the Sandstone Island. The Lord of the Underworld's eyes gleamed as he spoke. You are the true ruler of the Sandstone Island? Then the Lord of the Holy City and the so-called power of the Holy City are all fake? Also, since you are the ruler of the Sandstone Island, you should know how to make the Sandstone Island ascend in broad daylight and break through the void, right? Feng Long looked past Alice and asked in surprise. It's very simple. All you need to do is kill me, take out my heart, and place my heart on the altar at the top of the Netherworld castle. Then, the Sandstone Island will ascend in broad daylight. Therefore, if you want to control the Sandstone Island, you have to kill me, the true ruler of the island. However, looking at how weak you are, I'm afraid that even Alice is no match for you. The Lord of the Underworld's lips curled up slightly. His handsome face was filled with a mocking smile. He did not mind revealing the secret of the Ascension Island at all. This was because in his opinion, Feng Long and the others were about to die. There was nothing wrong with telling the truth to the dead. So your heart is the true core of the Sandstone Island. If that's the case, then go to hell. Feng Long narrowed his eyes. His right hand, which was holding the halberd, suddenly stretched out and swept towards the Lord of the Underworld like an agile snake. Under the influence of the heaven and earth force, the surrounding vitality boiled violently, causing the halberd's power to become even sharper. Boom. However, Feng Long's powerful halberd was directly blocked by Alice. Alice's naked upper body was covered in a golden luster. Feng Long's halberd was like a tickle to Alice's hand. What a strong body. I wonder if Alice's body is stronger than Zhuowen's. Feng Long's expression changed slightly when he felt the strength of Alice's body. He could not help but think of Zhuowen's figure. Boom. After blocking Feng Long's halberd, Alice was expressionless. He suddenly threw a punch towards Feng Long's head. The powerful force formed a ring of airwaves in the air, as if it was going to tear the entire space apart. Feng Long snorted coldly. With a shake of his right hand, countless halberd shadows formed a defensive circle in front of him. Boom. The powerful force caused Feng Long to involuntarily retreat more than 10 meters. He staggered in the air, and only then did he stop in mid-air with the help of the recoil. Alice was indeed a legendary-level warrior. His physical strength far surpassed the Black Flood Dragon. Even Feng Long could not gain the slightest advantage against him. What a troublesome fellow. However, I'd like to see if your physical body is stronger, or if my halberd of raging waves is stronger. Feng Long no longer held back. Alice's strength was extremely strong. Ordinary methods would not be able to defeat him. Therefore, Feng Long could only use the Emperor armor skill, halberd of raging waves. Boom. Feng Long stomped his foot in the air, and endless waves surged out, covering an area of several dozen zhong around him. Numerous water pythons that looked like pillars that supported the heavens coiled around Feng Long, roaring towards the sky with a monstrous might. Halberd of raging waves, destroy. With a low shout, Feng Long stepped on the countless waves and directly swept towards Alice with countless water pythons. For a moment, the raging waves were like a dragon. Alice was expressionless. There was not the slightest trace of fear on his face. At this moment, his golden body swelled up, and his entire body grew several times larger. From 1 jong to 3 jong, he was almost like a small hill. Alice, whose body had swelled up, let out a beast-like roar. He stomped his foot on the ground, and the ground shattered into fine powder. Alice turned into an afterimage in the air. At the same time, he threw a punch. There was nothing fancy about it, but this punch actually formed an extremely ear-piercing explosion in the air. Obviously, the power of this punch was much stronger than before. Countless water pythons, accompanied by the imposing Fangtian halberd in Feng Long's hand, fiercely collided with Alice. Soon after, an earth-shattering explosion resounded in the metal room. Countless water droplets formed high-pressure water guns and splashed in all directions, directly piercing countless holes in the surrounding walls of the metal room. Break, break, break. Chapter 405. Aris, you're actually able to suppress Aris. Looks like your strength has exceeded my expectations. However, Aris isn't that easy to deal with. The Lord of the Underworld was surprised that Aris was being suppressed. However, he quickly regained his composure and flicked his finger. A golden light shot out from the Lord of the Underworld's finger and entered Aris' back. Roar! In the blink of an eye, Aris' body shone with a dazzling golden light. His body, which was originally 10 meters tall, expanded once again to 15 meters tall. Aris roared at the sky and waved his arms that were as thick as a small mountain. He directly tore apart the water pythons that coiled around his body, turning them into a dense curtain of rain that fell to the ground. Damn it! Aris' strength has increased again. Feng Long's expression changed slightly when he saw all the water pythons being torn apart by Aris. He stomped his foot again and the waves around him formed an even larger number of water pythons. They all rushed towards Aris in an attempt to trap him. At the same time, Feng Long stepped on the waves and tightened his grip on the halberd. Countless waves turned into large halberds that filled the sky and pierced towards Aris' vital points. Boom! At this moment, Aris' aura was like a rainbow. He took a step forward and punched out, shattering the densely packed water pythons into countless pieces. He stomped his huge foot on the ground and charged towards Feng Long, completely ignoring the large halberds that filled the sky. Clang! Clang! Countless halberds struck Aris' body and created countless sparks. However, they didn't leave a single mark on his body. His body is even more resilient than before. At this moment, Feng Long's expression finally changed. Aris' strength had already exceeded his expectations. He was probably comparable to a cultivator at the advanced stage of the King Realm. Feng Long was only at the intermediate stage of the King Realm. Even if he used the halberd of the stormy waves, his strength would only be comparable to Aris. However, Aris had an extremely abnormal body while he didn't. In this aspect, he was at a great disadvantage. Let's go all out. I don't believe I can't kill Aris. A trace of ruthlessness flashed through Feng Long's eyes. He didn't back down and charged forward with his halberd. At the same time, he continuously used the halberd of the stormy waves to collide with Aris. Boom! Boom! An ear-piercing rumble resounded within the metal room. The shockwaves from the battle caused Zhu Li and the others to retreat repeatedly. They didn't dare approach at all. A battle between Ultimate Emperor Realm cultivators wasn't something they could interfere in. Once they did, they would be courting death. Relying on his powerful body, Alice attacked without any regard for his life. Even when Feng Long's halberd struck his body, it was unable to break through Alice's powerful body. It only left a white mark on his body. In just an instant, Feng Long was completely at a disadvantage. He could only helplessly use the halberd of stormy waves to constantly defend against Alice attacks. He was barely able to hold on. This Alice's physical body is too abnormal. Big Brother Feng is completely suppressed. What should we do now? Julie's pretty face revealed a hint of anxiety as she asked in a panic. The other 3 team members lowered their heads slightly when they heard this. They didn't say anything as they looked at each other. They were well aware of their own abilities. If they interfered now, they would definitely die. After all, they weren't Ultimate Emperor Realm expert. Boom. In the air, Alice suddenly flipped his hands outwards and directly tore through the endless waves that were blocking his path. Then, he suddenly threw a punch towards Feng Long's head. Feng Long's movement technique was extremely nimble. He leaned to the side and dodged Alice's punch. At the same time, he used the waves around him to conceal his figure, so Alice couldn't tell where his real body was. Kid, weren't you full of confidence in the beginning? You even arrogantly declared that you would kill me. Why have you become a coward now? If you're so afraid of my treasures, what right do you have to challenge me? The Lord of the Underworld said impatiently from his throne. He hated Feng Long's hiding and dodging style of battle. Feng Long, who was hidden in the waves, didn't utter a word. He only focused on dodging Alice's attacks. In reality, Feng Long was already feeling bitter inside. He originally thought that after breaking through to the Ultimate Emperor realm, he would definitely be able to deal with the Lord of the Underworld. However, he never imagined that the Lord of the Underworld's strength would exceed his expectations. Just Alice, who had been sent by the Lord of the Underworld, was already enough to tire him out. If the Lord of the Underworld was even stronger, wouldn't he be no match for him at all? You're hiding like a mouse. How boring. Looks like I'll have to drag you out. The Lord of the Underworld laughed coldly. He suddenly squeezed his right hand and an invisible force instantly entered the endless waves. Soon after, Feng Long, who was in the depths of the waves, was shocked to discover that the flowing waves around him were actually dispersing without his control. In the end, they all froze into ice. How is this guy so strong? He actually broke through my stormy waves halberd so easily. The shock in Feng Long's eyes reached its peak when he saw that the surrounding waves had been frozen into ice by the invisible force. Boom! Countless ice cubes shattered at this moment. A huge golden figure descended from the sky and charged directly at Feng Long. It was Alice. Without the cover of the waves, Feng Long couldn't dodge at all. He could only face it head-on. Gritting his teeth, Feng Long lifted the halberd and swung it with his right hand. Like a whip, the halberd shot towards Aris' waist. However, what made Feng Long helpless was that Aris' body was too hard. Even if he used the halberd with all his strength, he was still unable to shake Aris in the slightest. In an instant, Alice closed in on Feng Long. Alice's golden fist punched out. The air shook and whistled. Boom! Feng Long swung the halberd in his right hand in an attempt to block Alice's powerful fist. However, what made Feng Long sad was that Alice's strength was too terrifying. It wasn't something that he could block at all. Fart! Feng Long spat out a mouthful of blood and was directly sent flying. He heavily smashed into the ground and slid on the ground for nearly a dozen meters before coming to a stop. Seeing Feng Long's clean defeat, Zhu Li and the others' expressions changed. They hurried to Feng Long's side and looked at Feng Long, who was vomiting blood on the ground. Big Brother Feng, are you all right? Zhu Li's beautiful eyes were filled with worry as she anxiously asked. Feng Long wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and said with a bitter smile, I'm not dead yet. What I didn't expect was that I'm not even Alice's opponent. I'm afraid that our 9 Dragons city will have to stop here in this Origin Energy Tower battle. Zhu Li and the others fell silent. Even the strongest genius of 9 Dragons city, Feng Long, wasn't Alice's opponent, let alone them. For a moment, the atmosphere became extremely solemn. Does Zhuowen have any hope of passing this stage? Zhu Li suddenly asked. Feng Long shook his head and said, it's very difficult. Zhuowen is indeed very strong, but he's not much stronger than me. He's probably about the same as Alice. However, behind Alice is the even more powerful Underworld King. Zhuowen might be able to defeat Alice, but it's impossible for him to defeat the Underworld King. This is because I suspect that the Underworld King's strength is already comparable to a peak Ultimate Emperor Realm expert. I'm afraid that he's not far from a peak Ultimate Emperor Realm expert. Zhu Li and the others heard this, and a trace of worry appeared in their eyes. Now, only 9 Dragons City and Vine Armor City's Zhuoan were left on the Sandstone Island. If the two of them couldn't pass the Underworld King stage, then wouldn't all the teams on the Sandstone Island be doomed to fail? The difficulty of this Sandstone Island is too high. There's actually an existence comparable to a peak Ultimate Emperor Realm expert. I'm afraid that only the geniuses of the teams from super cities might be able to defeat such an existence. Logically speaking, the first level of the Origin Chi Tower shouldn't be so difficult. Feng Long suddenly thought of something and said. When Zhu Li and the others heard this, they also realized that there was something strange about this Sandstone Island. Their 9 Dragons City was an extremely powerful high-grade city. If even they couldn't pass through, didn't that mean that the other low-grade high-grade cities had no hope of passing through? Alice, who was in the middle of the room, seemed to have received the Underworld King's order. He didn't continue to attack and instead stood expressionlessly beside the Underworld King. A trace of respect appeared on his face. Your strength is too weak. If you want to kill me, it's simply not enough. However, I'm not a bloodthirsty person. I can give you a chance to live. If you can tell me how to get out of this Sandstone Island, I promise you that I won't kill you. In fact, I'll even give you benefits that you can't hide, the Underworld King said with a strange look in his eyes. When Feng Long and the others heard this, they couldn't help but sneer in their hearts. Even they didn't know how to enter the Origin Chi Tower. They had only entered the Origin Chi Tower by relying on the identity token issued by the House of Marquis Qin. Moreover, only they could use the identity token. Others couldn't use it at all. Speaking of which, their understanding of the Origin Chi Tower wasn't much better than the Underworld King. Since you have a way to enter the Sandstone Island, don't you have a way to get out? Or do you not want to tell me? The Underworld King narrowed his eyes and said in a cold voice. Actually, we don't know how to get out of the Sandstone Island either, Zhu Li said with a bitter smile. You don't know? The Underworld King's face became extremely cold. It seems like you think that I'm easy to talk to and want to refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. Since you don't want to tell me, then die. Alice, get rid of all of them for me. After he finished speaking, Alice, who was like a small mountain, nodded respectfully. Then, he took heavy steps and instantly arrived in front of Feng Long and the others. He directly threw a punch at Feng Long's head. The wind created by the punch was like a hurricane. Feng Long and the others couldn't dodge it at all. It's over. Feng Long smiled bitterly. His eyes were filled with despair. Alice's punch was too powerful. They couldn't block it at all. They were afraid that they would all die here. Boom. Chapter 406. Crushing Rumble. A surging wave of air surged out. Soon after, Feng Long and the others were shocked to discover that Alice, who was as tough as a small mountain, had actually been pushed back over a dozen steps before he could stabilize himself. The wave of air dispersed, and a slender figure stood steadily before Feng Long and the others. He had black hair, black eyes, and a handsome face. His clothes fluttered even though there was no wind. Zhuoan. Feng Long was the first to react, and he couldn't help but speak softly. He never imagined that the person who had saved them would actually be Zhuoan. Moreover, what surprised him even more was that not only had Zhuoan blocked Alice's full-force punch, he had even forced Alice back over a dozen steps. Could it be that Zhuoan still hadn't revealed his true strength? Just how deeply has this fellow concealed his strength? He wasn't much stronger than me on the first level, but now he's able to force Alice back with a single punch. Just how strong has Zhuoan become? Feng Long smiled bitterly. After witnessing the scene from before, he suddenly felt that he couldn't see through this young man who had come from a low-level city. Oh, so it's you. I thought that you wouldn't dare to come up here, but you've finally shown yourself. Your strength isn't bad, you were actually able to force Alice back. Looks like you're the most powerful person here. Hee, the stronger you are, the better. You'll become even more valuable when you become part of my collection. A scarlet light flashed through the Lord of the Underworld's eyes as he stared fixedly at Zhuoan. It was as if he was looking at a piece of art, and his eyes were filled with admiration. Zhuowen, you have to be careful. Alice and the Lord of the Underworld aren't easy to deal with. Alice's strength is probably comparable to a cultivator at the late stage of the first cycle of the Emperor realm, and the Lord of the Underworld is even stronger. He's infinitely close to a cultivator at the second cycle of the Emperor realm, although your strength isn't bad. Feng Long suddenly stopped Zhuowen and hurriedly reminded him. After all, Zhuowen had just saved their lives. Although Feng Long was extremely scheming, he was not a petty person. Naturally, he knew how to repay kindness. Therefore, he still wanted to persuade Zhuowen not to be impulsive. I know all this. Actually, I've been standing behind the door for a long time. I've also clearly heard the conversation between you and the Lord of the Underworld. I'm also very clear about the strength of Alice and the Lord of the Underworld. Zhuowen paused and said with a faint smile. Feng Long shook his head helplessly when he heard this. He knew that since Zhuowen had said so, it meant that the latter did not intend to give up. Brother Feng, do you think Zhuowen has the ability to defeat Alice? Zhu Li suddenly asked nervously. I can't see through Zhuowen, but I believe that Zhuowen's strength is above Alice. After all, he directly defeated Alice just now. However, it's almost impossible for him to kill the Lord of the Underworld. Zhu Li, if the situation doesn't seem right later, let's directly teleport out of the Vitality Tower. Otherwise, we'll only lose our lives if we stay here. Feng Long shook his head and said. Zhu Li wrinkled her delicate nose when she heard this. Although she was a little unhappy with Feng Long's cowardly attitude, she also knew that it was impossible for them to defeat the Lord of the Underworld at this moment. Perhaps this Zhuowen has a chance to defeat the Lord of the Underworld? Zhu Li suddenly said. Perhaps. Feng Long muttered with a strange expression. Kid, since you've been standing outside the door all this while, you must have seen how powerful I am. Therefore, I advise you to stop struggling in vain. On this island, I'm the supreme existence. You can't kill me at all. So, you'd better obediently become my treasure, the Lord of the Underworld said with a strange smile. Shaking his head, Zhuowen said indifferently, I'm sorry, I'm not interested in becoming your treasure. However, I'm quite interested in your heart. Hee. Looks like you're really courting death. The Lord of the Underworld's face gradually turned cold. He pointed with his right hand and said, Alice, kill this guy directly. Boom. Alice still obeyed the Lord of the Underworld's orders expressionlessly. He moved his heavy feet and charged towards Zhuowen like a barbaric rhinoceros. His huge body caused intense tremors as he stomped on the ground, causing cracks to appear on the ground. The one who's courting death is not me, but you. With a cold shout, Zhuowen stomped his feet, and 2 pairs of huge thunder wings appeared on his back. At the same time, the color of his skin began to change from a glazed color to a fiery red color. Numerous fiery red lines appeared on the surface of Zhuowen's body as if red blood vessels were spitting out of his skin. Waves of fiery aura surged out from Zhuowen's body. I wonder how effective the 7th level of the Jade Stone body tempering technique is. Compared to this legendary warrior, Alice, who's stronger? The fiery red lines that covered the surface of Zhuowen's body were formed by bloody flames. Once these bloody flames were attached to the surface of Zhuowen's body, they could greatly increase the strength of Zhuowen's body, allowing his strength to reach an unimaginable level. Boom. Alice instantly approached Zhuowen. Compared to the huge Alice, Zhuowen was as small as an ant. Alice's huge golden fist was almost the size of Zhuowen. Facing the golden fist that was like a huge rock, Zhuowen was not afraid at all. He stood in front of the golden fist without any intention of dodging. His right hand clenched into a fist, and his right arm that was covered with fiery red lines directly swung out, brazenly smashing against the huge golden fist. At the same time, Zhuowen secretly mobilized the bloody flames in his body. The moment they came into contact with Alice, they directly invaded his blood. Crack. The crisp sound of bones cracking was immediately heard. Immediately after, Feng Long and the rest were shocked to discover that Alice's huge right arm was distorted in an irregular manner. Even his wrist was bent backward. Alice's right arm was actually crippled by Zhuowen. Feng Long and the rest looked at Alice's almost dislocated right arm in disbelief. Their pupils shrank to the size of needles. Alice, who was not even afraid of the Emperor rank armor skill halberd of stormy waves, actually had his right arm crippled by Zhuowen. With his right arm crippled, Alice was still expressionless, as if he did not feel any pain at all. His left arm that was ready to attack directly attacked Zhuowen's back. Boom! Zhuowen's expression did not change. His left hand reached up and directly caught the left arm that was attacking from behind. Then, his left hand suddenly rotated 360 degrees and directly crippled Alice's left arm. It seems that Alice has already been made into a puppet by you. His intelligence has already been erased by you. No wonder he doesn't even feel pain. Just nice, I'll help him get rid of it. Zhuowen's expression was cold. His left hand that was grabbing Alice's left arm suddenly pulled. Alice's mountain-like body directly fell down. At the same time, Zhuowen's right arm that was ready to attack suddenly punched out. Waves of bloody flames burst out and directly blasted into Alice's forehead. Poochie. Zhuowen's right arm punched a bloody hole in between Alice's eyebrows. A wisp of blood flame flower drilled into Alice's body from this bloody hole. Following Alice's blood, it began to spread throughout Alice's meridians. The bloody flames were extremely peculiar. Once they came into contact with blood, they would continuously burn. Its nourishment came from blood. The stronger the bloodmaster, the more terrifying the bloody flames that could be produced. Sizzle. Sizzle. In an instant, all the blood in Alice's body was spread by the bloody flames. In just an instant, his entire body was covered in bloody flames. In just an instant, Alice's huge body was directly burned to ashes. Hiss. Seeing Zhuowen finish off Alice so quickly, Feng Long and the others all gasped. They could only stare blankly at the pile of ashes that had gathered into a small mountain under Zhuowen's feet. Those were the ashes of Alice that had been burned to ashes by the bloody flames. As the wind blew, they fluttered in the air. He finished off Alice so quickly. Isn't this too fast? Feng Long recovered from his shock after a long time. The corner of his eyes kept twitching. He had fought with Alice for so long and had lost in the end. However, Zhuowen had finished off Alice with a few extremely powerful moves. This immediately made Feng Long, who was originally somewhat arrogant, feel ashamed. This Zhuowen is really abnormal. Alice is a legendary-level warrior. How could he be finished off so easily? Zhu Li and the others also stared blankly at the ashes on the ground. They had yet to recover from the shocking scene. The Lord of the Underworld narrowed his crimson eyes as he stared intently at Zhuowen in front of him. The Lord of the Underworld's heart was filled with astonishment at how Alice had been finished off so quickly. He was well aware of how strong Alice's physical body was. Although Alice's physical body was slightly weaker than his, the king of the Netherworld who focused on physical strength, Alice's physical body was considered extremely strong among human ancient martial art practitioners. Very few ancient martial art practitioners had a physical body that was stronger than Alice's. However, Zhuowen had directly crippled Alice in a head-on clash. Clearly, this child's physical body was much stronger than Alice. In particular, the bloody flames that surged out of Zhuowen's body made the Lord of the Underworld extremely fearful. He had actually burned Alice to ashes. What a shocking physical body. There aren't many human warriors who can defeat Alice. However, you were able to clash head-on with him and cripple Alice. Even I am impressed by the strength of your physical body. Hehe, you're qualified to challenge me. The Lord of the Underworld slowly stood up from his throne. His crimson eyes looked down at Zhuowen from above as the corners of his mouth curled up into a beautiful arc. Continue acting tough. Will you die if you don't? Watch me beat you until you're looking for your teeth on the ground. Die. Zhuowen could not stand the Lord of the Underworld's condescending attitude. He stomped his foot and the bloody flames in his body surged out, enveloping his entire body. In an instant, the temperature in the metal room soared to an extremely terrifying level. Even the metal on the walls of the room melted under the high temperature and flowed all over the floor. Chapter 407. The Lord of the Underworld's real body. The entire metal room was filled with endless crimson flames. The crimson flames looked as if they were dyed with blood. It was a poignant yet eerie sight. Thud, thud, thud. Zhuowen slowly walked out of the endless crimson flames. His gaze was extremely cold. The metal throne in the middle of the room melted into a silver liquid under the burning of the crimson flames. The Lord of the Underworld's expression changed slightly as he took a few steps back. What a strange flame. It actually makes my blood feel like it's burning. The Lord of the Underworld's expression was solemn. He stared at the crimson flames around him with fear. The moment he touched the crimson flames, the blood in his body had left his meridians uncontrollably. Boom. Zhuowen was expressionless at that moment. He took a step forward and the two pairs of lightning wings on his back shrouded him. His entire body turned into a blinding blue lightning as he charged toward the Lord of the Underworld. Brat. If you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish. The Lord of the Underworld stood tall. He shook his right hand and a black energy condensed into a black long sword in his palm. He then stomped his foot and a black ring of air was formed around him. It separated the crimson flames that were coming toward him. At the same time, the lightning that Zhuowen had turned into arrived before the Lord of the Underworld. He held the moon demon dragon's pine spear tightly in his right hand and thrust it toward the Lord of the Underworld's chest like a snake. The Lord of the Underworld sneered. He waved his right hand and the black long sword turned into countless shadows that blocked the moon demon dragon's pine spear. At the same time, he clenched his left hand and condensed another black long sword. He then lifted his left hand and the black long sword cut through the air and slashed toward Zhuowen's chest. Boom! A thunderous sound was heard. The two pairs of lightning wings on Zhuowen's back opened and closed. He turned into a lightning bolt and dodged the Lord of the Underworld's slash. The lightning bolt was extremely fast and appeared behind the Lord of the Underworld in an instant. It then turned into Zhuowen's figure. The fourth style of the Moon Demon secret technique, blood-bursting style. Break for me. Zhuowen, who was above the Hades King, bellowed and immediately performed the blood-bursting style. His right hand, which was holding the blood-red spear, smashed down violently. A huge spear shadow appeared in the void. It was like a towering blood-red mountain peak that smashed towards the Hades King's head with a rumble. However, the Lord of the Underworld was clearly not to be trifled with. He did not even look behind him. He crossed his black blades and lifted them up, blocking the huge spear shadow that was descending from the sky. Then, the Lord of the Underworld's crossed blades opened and closed, directly breaking the huge blood-red spear shadow. The blood rupture style was actually broken. This Netherworld King is indeed powerful. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed when he saw the blood rupture style being broken apart so easily by the Netherworld King. However, his movements were not slow at all. He swept the blood-colored great spear in the air and executed the fifth style of the demonic moon secret scripture, blood explosion style. Waves of blood chi gushed out from the apertures on his body and formed countless blood-colored balls. Boom, boom, boom. The blood-colored balls shot towards the Lord of the Underworld. When they were only 10 feet away from the Lord of the Underworld, they all exploded. The aftermath of the explosion caused the entire metal room to shake continuously. Looks like it's not enough. Boundless Sword Gale, come out. Looking at the exploding blood-colored balls below, Zhuowen knew that with the Lord of the Underworld's strength, he would not be injured so easily. Therefore, he took out the fourth-grade origin formation, Boundless Sword Gale, directly from his Chenkuan bag. Flying sword controlling execution, cut down everything for me. Zhuowen immediately formed a sword seal with his hands and pointed his right sword finger downwards. The 108 sword-shaped spiritual treasures in the Boundless Sword Gale gathered together and formed a huge long sword that was dozens of feet long. The surface of the long sword glowed with flowing light. The flying sword controlling execution was the first of the 3 great sword moves contained in the Boundless Sword Gale. Although the 3 great sword moves in the Boundless Sword Gale were extremely obscure and profound, Zhuowen had already obtained the Boundless Sword Gale for more than a year. Naturally, he had fully comprehended the sword moves within. Among them, Zhuowen had basically completely mastered the first move, Flying Sword Controlling Execution, and the second move, falling flower wave-breaking kill. However, he had not completely mastered the third move, 9 consecutive moves of the revolving heaven sword dance. According to the information in the Boundless Sword Gale, the third move, 9 consecutive moves of the revolving heaven sword dance, was the most powerful. If it was fully executed, its power might be comparable to the power of a mid-level royal tier armor skill. It was much more powerful than Feng Long's Stormy Waves halberd technique, which was a low-level royal tier armor skill. Ding! The crisp sound of a sword rang out. The huge long sword turned into a ray of flowing light and directly shot into the explosion area below. Immediately after, an extremely dazzling cold light burst forth. For a moment, other than the violent explosive energy in the explosion area, there were also countless extremely sharp sword lights flickering. Whoosh! The sound of something breaking through the air suddenly rang out. Zhuowen's eyes suddenly narrowed. He found that in the explosion area below, the huge longsword transformed by the Boundless Sword Gale was flying directly toward him. Its speed was almost at its limit. Bang! Zhuowen swung the blood-red spear in his right hand and directly bombarded the huge longsword. The ear-piercing sound of metal clashing was heard. Under the huge impact, Zhuowen was forced to retreat continuously. The soles of his feet stepped in the void, and he barely managed to stop himself. The mind power in his body suddenly spread out. Under the control of his mind power, the huge long sword immediately turned into 108 sword-shaped spirit treasures under the control of his mind power. They circled around Zhuowen in an extremely orderly manner. Boom! At the same time, the explosion area below was suddenly enveloped by a black energy. It slowly dissipated, revealing the figure of a red-eyed young man in a black suit. Boy, is that all you've got? If that's all you've got, you can just die now. At this moment, the Lord of the Underworld was completely unharmed. He lightly stepped on the void and fixed his gaze on Zhuowen. The black blade in his hand slashed across the void, and a huge crescent-shaped black blade light cut through the void and swept toward Zhuowen. Of course not. Zhuowen swept the spear in his right hand in front of him and destroyed the huge blade light. Then, he suddenly clenched his left hand, and the strange crimson flame appeared in his palm again. Then, under the Lord of the Underworld's confused gaze, he wiped the crimson flame on the surface of the blood-red spear. Instantly, the demon moondragon spine spear was surrounded by the crimson flame and turned into a strange crimson flame spear. The crimson flame has the characteristic of burning blood. As long as a living being has blood in their body, no matter how tough your body is, as long as the crimson flame touches you, your blood will definitely be burned by the crimson flame. Lord of the Underworld, my crimson flame is the best at restraining a monster with thick skin like you. With a cold smile, Zhuowen suddenly took a step forward. The crimson flame spear in his right hand was like a swimming dragon as it swept toward the Lord of the Underworld. Looking at the crimson flame on the demon moondragon spine spear, the Lord of the Underworld's expression turned grave. The strange crimson flame in Zhuowen's body did indeed have a suppressive effect on him. However, this kind of suppression did not have much effect on the Lord of the Underworld. Although the suppression was not great, Zhuowen's strength was similar to his. With the crimson flame, Zhuowen would definitely be able to suppress the Lord of the Underworld. It's too early for you to be complacent. Do you really think that a mere crimson flame can do anything to me? What a joke! The Lord of the Underworld was not to be outdone. With 2 black blades in his hands, he turned into a series of after-images in mid-air and directly swept toward Zhuowen. Boom! 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 In an instant, the two of them were engaged in a fierce battle. The sound of metal clashing continuously exploded in the room. The two of them were extremely fast, almost forming after-images in the room. It was impossible to tell who was Zhuowen or the Lord of the Underworld. From the continuous clashing sounds of pressure, one could tell that an extremely intense battle was taking place in the room. Outside the door, Feng Long and the rest looked into the room from afar. When they saw the intense battle in the room, they were shocked. With their strength, they could naturally feel how terrifying the Lord of the Underworld's strength was. What a powerful Lord of the Underworld! Based on the strength that the Lord of the Underworld has displayed, I'm afraid that he's already at the level of a peak Huang Jing. And Zhuowen is actually able to fight the Lord of the Underworld to a standstill. This fellow is really terrifying, Feng Long said dejectedly as he stared at the battle in the room. At this moment, the strength that Zhuowen had displayed truly left him in the dust. Even with his arrogant character, he had to admit that regardless of talent or strength, he was indeed far inferior to the former. 2 hours, 4 hours, 10 hours, half a day, 1 day, 1 day and 1 night. The two of them had fought for 1 day and 1 night. They had exchanged no less than a few thousand blows, but there was still no sign of victory or defeat. However, after such a long battle, the two of them had exhausted a lot of their strength. Their chests were heaving up and down, and their bodies were covered in wounds. However, due to the suppression of the blood flames, the Lord of the Underworld's injuries were more serious than Zhuowen's. At this moment, he was no longer as elegant as before. His neat robes had become tattered, and there were many terrifying wounds on his body. I really didn't expect you to be able to fight with me to this extent. Your strength has greatly exceeded my expectations. However, this is the end of it. The Lord of the Underworld was stern at this moment. He was truly slightly shocked by Zhuowen's strength. He had never thought that Zhuowen would be able to fight with him to this extent. However, he also knew that with the suppression of the blood flames, the chances of him losing in the end were far too great. As a result, he had to end the battle quickly to have a chance at victory. You're the second person in the past 1,000 years to force me to reveal my true form. The first person was the Lord of the Holy City, Aris, who had once tried to seal me. However, just as you've seen, Aris became my treasure in the end. Now, your fate will be the same as Aris. You will die here and become my treasure. The Lord of the Underworld sneered. He had not even fought with the Lord of the Underworld's strongest strength. I can't let the Lord of the Underworld hatch successfully. The Lord of the Underworld who hasn't revealed his true form is already tiring enough for me. If he reveals his true form, even I won't be his opponent. Chapter 408. Crimson Lotus Rumble. The crimson spear smashed into the giant black egg and bounced off. Zhuowen was forced to take more than 10 steps back by the huge recoil. The crimson spear stabbed into the ground, and he barely managed to stabilize himself. What a tough egg. No wonder the Lord of the Underworld is so relaxed in hiding in this giant black egg. It seems like he's not afraid that I'll be able to smash it to pieces. Zhuowen stared at the black egg that was growing bigger and bigger as he rubbed his numb hand. Thump, thump. The sound of a heartbeat reverberated throughout the room. The black egg had already swelled from several tens of feet to several tens of feet in size. Moreover, from the looks of it, the black egg would continue to grow. It might even reach a terrifying size of several thousand feet. As the black egg grew bigger, the aura it emitted became more and more terrifying. It had already surpassed the strength of a peak Ultimate Emperor stage practitioner, and was probably comparable to a half-step Ultimate Emperor stage practitioner. Kid. There's no need to hold back. If the Lord of the Underworld fully matures, his strength will probably reach the early stage of the Ultimate Emperor stage. At that time, even if you have many trump cards, you won't be a match for the Lord of the Underworld. Xiao Hei's voice rang out in his mind. She sounded quite serious. Zhuowen nodded slightly. He knew that the situation was critical. He slapped his Chenkuan bag and immediately took out a palm-sized, 3-legged cauldron. It was the Earth-rank soul treasure, the 9-wheel heaven burning cauldron. 9-wheel heaven burning array, condense. He slapped the 9-wheel heaven burning cauldron with his right hand, and the small cauldron in his palm immediately grew in size. It grew to several dozen feet in size, and the opening at the bottom of the cauldron spewed out 3 types of powerful earth fires. They were the 9 heavens thunder blaze, the 3000 jade lotus blaze, and the star blaze. The blue, green, and white earth fires merged together in the opening of the 9-wheel heaven burning cauldron, turning into an extremely violent 3-colored firestorm that soared into the sky. In the blink of an eye, the entire golden room collapsed inch by inch under the raging firestorm. Waves of heat waves gushed forth, almost vaporizing the air into nothingness. Feng Long's group, who were originally standing outside the main door and observing the situation, quickly retreated when the heat wave came pouncing over. Only when they retreated to an open ground dozens of meters away did Feng Long's group stare blankly at the three-colored firestorm that was like a pillar supporting the sky. They were unable to speak for a long time. They did not expect Zhuowen to have such a powerful trump card, especially the 9-wheel burning sky cauldron that Zhuowen had taken out. Although they did not recognize it, they could tell from the aura of the 9-wheel burning sky cauldron that it was definitely an earthly soul treasure. Moreover, it was an earthly soul treasure with extraordinary power. This Zhuowen is truly terrifying. I originally thought that this person only had a freakish physical body. I did not expect him to have an earthly soul treasure, a supreme treasure that even our 9 Dragons city does not possess. Feng Long shook his head. The trace of unwillingness in his heart had finally disappeared. Whether it was the freakish strength that Zhuowen had displayed or the earthly soul treasure that he had just taken out, Feng Long was far inferior to the former. No matter how unwilling he was, he had to admit that this Zhuowen was truly monstrous. Brother Feng. I knew it. This Zhuowen might actually be able to defeat the Lord of the Underworld. Zhu Li's gaze was fixed on Zhuowen as she suddenly said this. The Lord of the Underworld is not that easy to deal with. If my guess is correct, once the Lord of the Underworld successfully descends into his true body, his strength will probably reach the initial stage of the second wheel Ultimate Emperor stage. Even if Zhuowen has an earthly soul treasure, the difference in their realms is too great. It is unlikely that he will be a match for the Lord of the Underworld. Feng Long shook his head and still objected. Boom. The tricolored firestorm whizzed past and ruthlessly collided with the black egg that was still expanding. Instantly, the surrounding air within a radius of several hundred feet flowed in reverse. Shockwaves swirled in all directions as the sound of an explosion rang out. Bang! What surprised Zhuowen was that under the impact of the tricolored firestorm, the expansion of the black egg actually shrank. It was as if the black egg was extremely fearful of the firestorm. It's actually effective. Then just break it for me. Seeing that the firestorm had a suppressive effect on the black egg, Zhuowen hurriedly activated the 3 earthly fires within the 9-wheel incineration cauldron. Immediately, the tricolored firestorm became even more powerful and turbulent, faintly showing signs of suppressing the black egg. Damned brat! You actually have earthly fires on you, and more than one type at that. However, this king will not suppress it just like that. Don't even think of stopping this king's true body from descending. A low and venomous roar rang out from the black egg. As soon as the roar died down, the surface of the black egg immediately emitted an extremely dense ink-black light. Following that, Zhuowen was shocked to discover that the tricolored firestorm was actually suppressed by this black energy. The black egg's expansion speed actually increased by a lot. In the blink of an eye, it had expanded to more than 800 feet. Moreover, this expansion speed was still increasing. Obviously, the Lord of the Netherworld had used a secret technique to accelerate the expansion of the black egg. Seeing this scene, Zhuowen's eyes were immediately covered with a layer of darkness. He definitely could not allow the Lord of the Netherworld's true body to appear. Otherwise, he would not be a match for the Lord of the Netherworld. It's time to test out the blood flame, a special flame whose strength surpasses the 3 types of earthly fires, after entering the 9-wheel incineration cauldron. How powerful will it be? Hopefully, it will be able to completely suppress the Lord of the Netherworld. Zhuowen clenched his teeth, and wisps of strange blood flame immediately surged out of his body. Under Zhuowen's control, the endless blood flame slowly entered the 9-wheel incineration cauldron. After passing through the 9-wheel incineration formation in the cauldron, the blood flame completely merged with the other 3 types of earthly fires, greatly increasing the 9-wheel incineration formation's strength. In an instant, the tricolored firestorm was gradually dyed with a poignant blood-red color. In an instant, the firestorm's strength immediately surged, directly suppressing the black energy that enveloped the surface of the black egg. Bastard brat, this king will definitely kill you. Kill you. Under the suppression of the firestorm, the black egg's expansion speed completely stopped. It stopped at 800 feet in size and completely stopped expanding. At this moment, the Lord of the Netherworld's flustered and exasperated voice rang out. His tone was extremely terrifying as he gritted his teeth. Crack! The black egg shattered at this moment, and a wave of ink-black energy flowed out in all directions, directly annihilating the firestorm in front of him. Then, a figure that was 800 feet in size slowly emerged from the black egg. The Lord of the Netherworld's true body looked no different from the evil creature. The only difference was that the Lord of the Netherworld's true body was much larger, and there was a sharp, ink-black horn growing out of his forehead. At this moment, the Lord of the Netherworld's expression was extremely gloomy. He had never imagined that the process of his true body's descent would be ruined by Zhuowen. His true body was originally several hundred feet in size, and his strength was comparable to that of an early-stage two-wheel Ultimate Emperor Realm ancient martial art practitioner. However, due to the obstruction of Zhuowen's firestorm, he could only break out of the egg prematurely. His body was only 800 feet in size, and his strength was only around the level of a half-step two-wheel Ultimate Emperor Realm. The loss could be said to be heavy. Zhuowen looked at the flustered and exasperated Lord of the Netherworld with some surprise. He had not expected the latter to be able to break out of the egg prematurely. This was something that he had not expected. Brat! You ruined this king's true body's descent ceremony. This king will definitely kill you. I will definitely kill you. Go to hell. The Lord of the Netherworld's chest was filled with rage. After breaking out of the egg, he flew directly towards Zhuowen. His huge, sharp claws tore through the void, shattering the space as he attacked Zhuowen's head. He had to kill this detestable brat in front of him. Otherwise, he would not be able to vent the hatred in his heart. Even though he broke out of the egg prematurely, he still has the strength of a half-step two-wheel Ultimate Emperor Realm. This Lord of the Netherworld is indeed a little abnormal. Zhuowen's expression immediately became serious. The difference between a peak Ultimate Emperor Realm and a half-step two-wheel Ultimate Emperor Realm was only half a step. However, the difference in strength between the two was still quite large. At this moment, Zhuowen was only comparable to a peak Ultimate Emperor Realm ancient martial art practitioner. He was afraid that he would not be able to defeat the Lord of the Netherworld at this moment. Brat! Try to combine the blood flames and extreme frost to form the fire and ice lotus. This dragon lord can feel that the blood flames in your body are extremely extraordinary. I'm afraid that the fire and ice lotus formed from the combination will be beyond our imagination. At this moment, Xiao Hei's voice suddenly rang out in his mind. Hearing this, Zhuowen's eyes immediately lit up. The blood flames had mutated and formed when he broke through to the 7th level of the Jade Stone body tempering technique. Its strength was far greater than the other 3 types of earth fire in his body. As for extreme frost, it was even more powerful than the other earth rank frost chi. The fire and ice lotus formed from the combination of the 2 extremely powerful ice and fire energies would probably be much more terrifying than before. Let's give it a try then. Zhuowen also knew that he could only try the fire and ice lotus now. Otherwise, apart from this move, he really could not think of any other powerful item that could resist the Lord of the Netherworld, whose strength had reached the half-step two-wheel Ultimate Emperor Rel. Whoosh! In an instant, Zhuowen summoned extreme frost and blood flames. Then, he skillfully combined the blood flames and extreme frost in his hand slowly. With a tearing sound, a white lotus with a touch of poignant beauty slowly bloomed from Zhuowen's hand. An unbearably hot aura spread throughout the entire room. As soon as the blood-colored lotus appeared, the surrounding space actually formed a vacuum. At this moment, the Lord of the Netherworld had already descended above Zhuowen's head. A pair of extremely sharp giant claws were already swinging down. It would only take a breath's time to tear Zhuowen into pieces. Perhaps this fire and ice lotus can really resist the Lord of the Netherworld. As he muttered softly, Zhuowen's eyes were filled with madness. He tossed his right hand upwards, and a strange blood lotus suddenly bloomed into the sky. Blood lotus? Brat, you can't possibly think that this little lotus can stop me, right? Haha. How laughable. Just die for me. The Lord of the Netherworld's face was filled with a mocking smile. His giant claws slammed toward the blood lotus without a care in the world. He wanted to slap this troublesome lotus away. Boom. Chapter 409. Inner Demon. Boom. Destructive energy spread out from the void. Ripples appeared in the void. Wherever the ripples passed, the entire metal room was reduced to dust. A huge crater was formed on the spot. It was deep and terrifying. In the void, a huge blood-colored lotus flower that was a few hundred feet tall slowly bloomed. Wherever the blood-colored lotus flower passed, there was no difference. Everything was crushed into dust by the powerful force of the blood-colored lotus flower. When Feng Long and the rest realized that something was amiss, they had already retreated to a safe place. They looked up at the huge blood-colored lotus flower in the void. The shock on their faces had reached its peak. Their facial muscles had stiffened because they had been gaping for a long time. Is this an armor technique? How can it be so powerful? I'm afraid that even the Netherworld King, who's half a step into the ultimate second-wheel emperor realm, wouldn't be able to withstand such a powerful energy. Feng Long involuntarily swallowed his saliva as he muttered to himself with a dry mouth. Looks like we have underestimated Zhuowen. I never thought that he would have such a technique. No wonder he dared to challenge the Lord of the Underworld alone. Zhu Li, who was beside Feng Long, opened her cherry lips slightly and muttered softly. The huge blood-colored lotus flower bloomed in the void like a night-blooming epiphyllum. Soon after, it gradually withered. The blood-colored petals withered in the void, emitting a poignant yet beautiful color. The moment the blood-colored lotus flower disappeared, a figure covered in blood-red flames slowly walked over from the void. He came to the top of the huge crater below the blood-colored lotus flower. His sharp eyes quietly stared at the motionless Lord of the Underworld in the deep crater. At this moment, the Lord of the Underworld was in an extremely miserable state. Under the power of the blood-colored lotus flower, the scales on his body were all flipped over, revealing terrible wounds. The Lord of the Underworld's originally bright eyes were now extremely dim. Cough cough. I never thought that you would still have such a trump card. I really can't accept my defeat. If this king's true body had descended, how could I have lost? How could I have lost? You little bastard, you despicable fellow. The Nether King coughed violently, and his lantern-sized eyes stared fixedly at Zhuowen, who was above the crater. There was dense unwillingness and resentment in the depths of his eyes. Even until now, he still couldn't believe that he would actually lose, and he would lose in such an aggrieved manner. So what if I can't accept it? A loss is a loss. Do you think you can win it back just by saying a few words of unwillingness? Zhuowen was expressionless. He patted his Chenkuan bag with his right hand and took out the Demon Moon Dragon's Pine Spear. With a gentle shake of his right hand, the spear slithered into the gaps between the scales of the Lord of the Netherworld like an agile snake and went straight into his meridian. Wang. The Moon Demon Dragon Spine Spear was like a hungry beast. With a long roar, it started to absorb the blood essence of the Lord of the Underworld. Bastard! What are you doing? He's actually absorbing my blood essence. Stop it. Stop it. Do you understand? Feeling the loss of his blood essence, the Lord of the Underworld's eyes were filled with rage. He stared fiercely at Zhuowen, who was floating in mid-air. If looks could kill, Zhuowen would have been killed 1,000 times over by now. Zhuowen didn't pay any attention to the roaring Lord of the Underworld. Instead, he sat cross-legged in mid-air, closed his eyes, and started to silently recover his vitality. The power of the blood-colored lotus was beyond his imagination. It was actually able to injure the Lord of the Underworld. However, the amount of blood essence required was also extremely terrifying. Even Zhuowen felt exhausted at this moment. Zhuowen had long planned to let the Moon Demon Dragon Spine Spear absorb the blood essence of the Lord of the Underworld. After all, the true dragon bloodline of an ordinary evil being from the Netherworld tribe could raise the Moon Demon Dragon Spine Spear by a small level. As the ruler of the Netherworld tribe, the true dragon bloodline in the Lord of the Netherworld tribe would probably be even purer. After the Moon Demon Dragon Spine Spear absorbed all the blood essence of the Lord of the Underworld, it might even become an Earth-rank spiritual treasure. At that time, the Moon Demon Dragon Spine Spear would undergo a true transformation. Seeing that Zhuowen was so stubborn, the Lord of the Underworld almost went into a state of rage. Unfortunately, his injuries were too severe. He was on the verge of death, and he couldn't even move. Even if I die, I won't allow you to humiliate me like this. Hee hee. You want this king's blood essence? Little brat, keep dreaming. Even if this king dies, I won't let you have your way. The Lord of the Underworld gritted his teeth and glared at Zhuowen. Soon after, he quickly chanted an obscure incantation. Then, the aura on the Lord of the Underworld's body withered at a speed visible to the naked eye. At the same time, the Lord of the Underworld's huge body started to expand. As if he sensed the Lord of the Underworld's abnormality, Zhuowen frowned and opened his eyes. When he saw the Lord of the Underworld's expanding body, his expression changed drastically. He stomped his foot and tried to stop the Lord of the Underworld from self-destructing. Kid, it's too late. Even if I die, I won't allow you to blaspheme my bloodline. Hee hee, don't even think about obtaining my blood essence of the true dragon. The Nether King stared at Zhuowen, whose expression had changed drastically in the sky, and he immediately roared with laughter of ridicule. After that, his entire body swelled to the limit before exploding. Countless pieces of flesh and blood sprayed towards the surroundings from the force of the explosion. For a time, a dense rain of blood descended from the sky. Zhuowen, who was in midair, was directly sent flying backward by the impact of this powerful explosion. His feet stepped on the void, and he stabilized his body in midair dozens of meters away. Did he self-destruct? Hovering in midair, Zhuowen looked at the thick rain of blood around him. His eyes were filled with a complicated expression. The Lord of the Underworld's character was really unyielding. He would rather self-destruct than let Zhuowen absorb his blood essence of the true dragon. The Lord of the Underworld is the ruler of the Underworld tribe after all. He has his own dignity and glory. Although you've defeated the Lord of the Underworld, using the demon moondragon spine spear to absorb his blood essence is a humiliation to him. If it were you, I'm afraid you'd be even more extreme than the Lord of the Underworld. Xiao Hei's voice rang out at this moment. However, there was a hint of regret in her voice. Was my action just now wrong? Looking up at the endless rain of blood in the sky, Zhuowen's mind suddenly flashed with countless faces of hatred, grief, anger, pleading, fear, and so on. The owners of these faces were all the enemies Zhuowen had killed over the years. Perhaps there were good and evil among these people. They had lovers and family members, helplessness and concern. However, they all had one thing in common. They had all blocked Zhuowen's path and even tried to kill him. Of course, in the end, they were all killed by Zhuowen instead. Zhuowen realized that he had unknowingly viewed human lives as worthless. He had become numb to human lives. At this moment, Zhuowen's eyes became confused. He stood quietly in midair as he bathed in the rain of blood. Inner demon. This kid. Could it be that he has fallen into his inner demon at this time? Xiao Hei seemed to realize that something was wrong with Zhuowen. She could not help but frown. Damn it. Kid, hurry up and wake up. Don't lose yourself in your inner demon. Otherwise, you'll really be consigned to eternal damnation. However, Xiao Hei's screams were of no use to Zhuowen. At this moment, Zhuowen's eyes were filled with a mountain of corpses and a rain of blood. The sky was filled with blood, and the faces of the countless people he had killed flashed in his eyes. Was I wrong? Suddenly, Zhuowen roared at the sky. A wave of emotions that had been accumulating in his heart for a long time suddenly exploded at this moment. An expression that seemed like both crying and laughing appeared on Zhuowen's face. Under the endless rain of blood, Zhuowen's frail figure seemed so lonely and weak at this moment. It was as if the patter of blood could completely drown his figure. You're wrong. You're completely wrong. From the moment you killed the first person, you were completely wrong. Your path is wrong, your life is wrong, and even your birth is wrong. Why are you still alive? You've obviously lived such a tiring life, so why are you forcing yourself to stay alive? Is there any meaning in scheming against others all day long? Is there any meaning in running around tirelessly and making enemies at every step? Don't you think that living in such a world is not tiring? If you die, it'll be easy. Only when you die can you be carefree and carefree. You don't have to think about anything, worry about anything, and worry about anything. Isn't this the reason why you've always wanted to become stronger? But as long as you're alive, you'll never be able to live a carefree and carefree life. Die. It'll be easy if you die. Hideous faces appeared in the sky amidst the endless rain of blood. They were all persuading, cursing, and tempting Zhuowen. They were all people that Zhuowen had killed before. Boom. A strange aura surged out from Zhuowen's body. Soon after, a blood-red barrier appeared with Zhuowen as the center. In this area, the rain of blood seemed to have become more viscous, and the ground was dyed a strong blood-red. Creak. Creak. The crisp sound of bones colliding reverberated clearly in this area. Blood-red skeletons slowly emerged from the blood-red ground in this area. There were humans and beasts among these skeletons. A blood-red flame burned in their hollow eyes. Damn it! After Zhuowen fell into his inner demon, he actually began to undergo the tribulation of heaven and earth. This guy is simply courting death. Could this inner demon be related to the Lord of the Underworld? A black light emerged from between Zhuowen's eyebrows, revealing the appearance of a dog, Xiao He. It was Xiao He. At this moment, Xiao He's gaze was extremely solemn. The number of blood-red skeletons around them was increasing, but Zhuowen's eyes were still in a daze. It was obvious that he was still trapped by his inner demon. He knew that if it did not appear, Zhuowen would be courting death in the face of the tribulation of heaven and earth in his current state. Zhuowen. Kid, when did you become so weak? You're actually affected by a mere inner demon. Hurry up and wake up. Chapter 410. Awakening the Lord of the Netherworld has really been defeated. Feng Long muttered to himself with a dry mouth as he stared at the motionless body of the Lord of the Netherworld in the giant pit in the distance. Zhu Li and the other three, who were following beside Feng Long, stared fixedly at the ruins in the distance that had already turned into rubble. They could not help but swallow their saliva a few times. Their hearts were extremely shocked. Although the Lord of the Netherworld's real body descending ceremony had been disrupted by Zhuowen, causing him to hatch prematurely, his strength was still at the level of a half-step second wheel ultimate emperor. Even if the five of them joined forces, they wouldn't be a match for such an existence. However, Zhuowen had completely crippled the Lord of the Netherworld by himself. Brother Feng. It seems like our Nine Dragons city no longer has a chance in this battle for the Vitality Tower. Who would have thought that a low-level city would have such a monstrous freak like Zhuowen? It's not a shame that we lost. Zhu Li sighed. Feng Long's face was filled with disappointment when he heard this. He knew that with his current strength, it was impossible for him to compete with Zhuowen for the Lord of the Netherworld's heart. He would only end up being killed instantly if he went over. Hey! That Lord of the Netherworld is a little strange. Oh no, he actually self-destructed. At this moment, Feng Long suddenly saw the body of the Lord of the Netherworld expanding continuously in the giant pit in the distance. After it had expanded to its limit, it directly exploded, causing a rain of blood to scatter in the air. Feng Long and the others were far enough away that they weren't affected by the self-destruction of the Lord of the Netherworld. However, Zhuowen, who was the closest to the explosion, was sent flying by the force of the explosion. At the same time, after the explosion, Feng Long squinted his eyes and immediately noticed a pitch-black heart that was several feet in size at the bottom of the giant pit. The strange thing was that this heart was still beating continuously, and it seemed to be full of vitality. The Lord of the Netherworld's heart. Feng Long's heart tightened when he saw the giant heart at the bottom of the giant pit in the distance. His gaze was fixed on the heart that was still beating, and a trace of greed and hope appeared on his face. This was the heart of the Netherworld King. It was the key to controlling the entire Sandstone Island. As long as they could obtain the heart and bring it to the altar at the top of the Netherworld Castle, they would be able to control the Sandstone Island and ascend to the second floor of the Vitality Tower. This was the most important thing that would determine whether or not Nine Dragons City would be able to ascend to the next level. Standing beside Feng Long, Zhu Li and the rest followed Feng Long's line of sight. When they saw the gigantic heart, their expressions changed. Big Brother Feng, Let's not think about it. The Netherworld King was killed by Zhuowen, so his heart should belong to Zhuowen. Furthermore, with Zhuowen's terrifying strength, even if the 5 of us were to join forces to snatch it, our chances of snatching it would be less than 10%. Although Zhu Li longed for the heart of the Lord of Hades, her rationality told her that it was basically impossible for her to snatch the heart from Zhuowen. Unexpectedly, Feng Long shook his head and stared fixedly at Zhuowen, who was standing in the rain of blood in the distance. He said, "If it were any other time, we would indeed have no chance to snatch the heart of the Lord of Hades from Zhuowen. However, could it be that all of you haven't noticed that Zhuowen isn't in a good state right now? Logically speaking, with Zhuowen's eyesight, after the Netherworld King detonated himself, he should be able to quickly discover the heart below." However, Zhuowen didn't notice it. Instead, his emotions became unstable. "I'm afraid that the Netherworld King held back before he detonated himself." As Feng Long spoke up to hear, a trace of a bright light flashed through his eyes. Although he didn't know what the Netherworld King had done to Zhuowen to cause Zhuowen to be in a daze, he knew that his chance to seize the Netherworld King's heart had arrived. "Could it be that Zhuowen did it on purpose for us to see?" Zhu Li questioned. "With Zhuowen's strength, there's utterly no need for him to put on an act for us. After all, so long as he was willing, he could even kill the 5 of us. Why would he need to care about us?" Feng Long became more and more certain, and his gaze became even more fervent as he stared at the Netherworld King's heart. He knew that as long as he obtained the heart, then 9th Dragon City wouldn't be eliminated and would possess the qualifications to enter the 2nd level of the Origin Tower. Boom! Right at this moment, a powerful and strange aura suddenly surged out explosively from Zhuowen's body in the distance. After that, Feng Long and the others noticed to their astonishment that a blood-red barrier had actually appeared in an area of over 100 m around Zhuowen. A familiar energy of the heavens and the earth instantly filled the area. This is the aura of a tribulation of the heavens and the earth. Has Zhuowen started to overcome the tribulation of the heavens and the earth? Could it be that this fellow isn't an Ultimate Emperor Realm Cultivator but a half-step Ultimate Emperor Realm Cultivator? Feng Long had just experienced a tribulation of the heavens and the earth not too long ago, so he naturally remembered the aura of the tribulation of the heavens and the earth. When Zhuowen began to undergo the tribulation of the heavens and the earth, he knew with a single glance that it was an aura unique to a tribulation of the heavens and the earth. However, what truly shocked Feng Long wasn't that Zhuowen was undergoing the tribulation of the heavens and the earth, but that Zhuowen was actually a half-step Ultimate Emperor Realm Cultivator. He clearly remembered that Zhuowen had used the energy of the heavens and the earth on the 1st floor of Nether Castle. Could it be that half-step Ultimate Emperor Realm Cultivators could also control the energy of the heavens and the earth? Just what kind of freak is this fellow? He's clearly just a half-step Ultimate Emperor Realm Cultivator, but is able to control the energy of the heavens and the earth that only Ultimate Emperor Realm Cultivators can control. Moreover, he's only a half-step Ultimate Emperor Realm Cultivator, yet is able to defeat the Netherworld King who's comparable to a half-step Ultimate Emperor Realm Cultivator. If this fellow succeeds in overcoming the tribulation, then wouldn't his strength be comparable to a half-step Ultimate Emperor Realm Cultivator? Feng Long's emotions were extremely complicated when he thought up to this point. At the same time, he began to hesitate whether or not he should seize the Netherworld King's heart from Zhuowen. "Big brother Feng. This Zhuowen is too monstrous. I'm afraid it's not worth offending such a monstrous genius for the sake of the Netherworld King's heart. Why don't we retreat?" Zhu Li's heart was extremely clear at this moment. The monstrous talent of Zhuowen in front of her was definitely something she had never seen before in her life. As long as such a person didn't die midway, he would definitely become one of the strongest cultivators in the Qingxian Empire in the future. Moreover, the talent that Zhuowen had displayed wasn't inferior to some of the geniuses on the Azure Emperor rankings. If Zhuowen was given a few more years, he might even be able to enter the Azure Emperor rankings. At that time, he would be an extremely dazzling monstrous genius in the entire Qingxian Empire. Sometimes, offending such a genius wasn't worth it. Feng Long stared fixedly at the slender figure in the distance, who was in the midst of the tribulation of the heavens and the earth. Out of the corner of his eye, he constantly paid attention to the giant heart in the deep pit in the distance. He, Feng Long, was the team leader of the Nine Dragons City team and also the most dazzling genius in the city. He really didn't want to disappoint the Nine Dragons City and his hopeful father. Now that he had finally arrived at the third level of the Netherworld Castle and the key to controlling the entire Sandstone Island had quietly appeared in front of him, he really wasn't willing to let it go just like that. Julie, you don't have to say any more. I must obtain the Netherworld King's heart. I, Feng Long, am not willing to stop at the first level of the Vitality Tower. As for that Zhuowen, although his talent is monstrous, he was only born in a low-level city and has no background at all. Our Nine Dragons City isn't afraid of him at all. Moreover, once we obtain the Netherworld King's heart, we will immediately control the Sandstone Island to break through the sky and soar into the sky. At that time, Zhuowen will definitely be directly teleported out of the Vitality Tower. Even if he holds a grudge in his heart, there's nothing he can do. As for outside the Vitality Tower, with the might of our Nine Dragons City, Zhuowen won't dare to act rashly. So, at this point, Feng Long's eyes were filled with a fiery passion. With a stomp of his foot, he rushed toward the deep pit in the distance. So, we don't need to be afraid of Zhuowen's revenge at all. After all, in this world, the strength of an individual is too insignificant. If this Zhuowen is smart, he definitely won't offend our Nine Dragons City too much. Seeing that Feng Long didn't listen to her advice and was determined to obtain the Netherworld King's heart, Julie felt a little helpless in her heart. However, she didn't oppose it. Zhuowen's strength and talent made her rather wary, but after all, the former was only from a low-level city. Perhaps they weren't Zhuowen's match in the Vitality Tower, but once outside the Vitality Tower, their Nine Dragons City's influence was enough to suppress Zhuowen to the point that he wouldn't dare to seek revenge. Therefore, as long as they successfully obtained the Netherworld King's heart, this Zhuowen wouldn't be a threat anymore. An endless rain of blood fell from the boundless blood-red land. A slender figure looked up at the sky with blurred eyes. In that blood-red vision, Zhuowen saw countless resentful faces, endless roars, and endless curses. Those were the faces of all the people he had killed. With blurred eyes, Zhuowen suddenly looked at these familiar yet unfamiliar faces and muttered, "All of you, also think that I'm wrong? Yes, you're wrong. From the moment your hands were stained with blood, you've already embarked on the wrong path. Now, only death can wash away the sins on your body. Therefore, you should just die. Only then can you atone for your past actions." The rain of blood accompanied by the blood-red faces constantly swayed in front of Zhuowen's eyes, and Zhuowen became even more confused. Do all of you who died by my hands have the right to say that I'm wrong? Suddenly, Zhuowen covered his head with both hands and roared in a low voice. This roar seemed to have been suppressed for a long time. Boom! Zhuowen covered his head with both hands and suddenly smashed it to the ground. Streams of mournful blood flowed down from the ends of his hair. The intense pain instantly caused Zhuowen's mind to become much clearer at this moment. Wrong. Perhaps the one who's wrong isn't me, but this world. In this world where the strong are respected and the weak are eaten by the strong, if you don't resist and struggle, then you'll only end up being slowly eroded by others. In this world, you either continuously become stronger and become a powerhouse who can break through everything, or continuously fall and become a weakling at the bottom who will slowly be annihilated. As he spoke, Zhuowen suddenly raised his head and took a step forward. A powerful aura burst out from his body, and at this moment, his eyes were as bright as the stars in the night sky. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.